was wrong to say I wouldn't change a thing, 'cause in the story of our lives, the best of times through colored glass, time rolls on enough to let me move on past, but every little now and then it creeps on back to shade my smile.
Vestiges After Dark is a philosophical speculation program sponsored by the Holy Nicolayan Catholic Church, an independent Catholic church inspired by the diversity of early Christianity and in communion with the Old Catholic Church. Presiding Bishop Bryan Ouellette presents perspectives on esotericism, metaphysics, philosophy, psychology, paranormal research, theology, spirituality, religion, and Catholicism. We are not affiliated with the Church of Rome. Our discussions of Catholicism are broader than, and distinct from, the Church of Rome. The views and opinions expressed are those of the individual participants.
Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, whichever the case may be. For all of you listening out there across the crazy planet Earth, welcome to Vestiges After Dark. And I am your host, Bishop Bryan Ouellette, coming to you live from the deep woods of western Georgia on this April 21st, 2026. We have been trying to get this show off the road this season, and we have been hitting every barrier there is, but I think we finally have the nuts and bolts worked out. And it's a good show for that, because this is open lines and open topics. Your questions, you're the guest tonight on Vestiges After Dark. Well, hello, everybody. Once again, I am your host, Bishop Bryan Ouellette, here with my co-host, Jamie Wolfe.
Good evening, everybody.
And, we have had a really difficult season. It seems like we are always saying that, right? We're always saying that. But, I really promise you, it's not entirely my fault. I mean, granted, I did not get into this work to be a podcaster or YouTuber. That was not the point of ordination. And nowhere in my wildest nightmares would I have ever guessed that that's what my ministry would be defined as, is this show. I mean, it's a nightmare to me because I have to do all the engineering, and I really don't know what I'm doing, but I'm pretty good at getting it figured out. The problem is, if Windows throws me a curveball and updates something and then starts changing weird little settings that you never, ever look at, that happens to be the be-all and end-all of whether or not you can successfully stream, well, I'm not going to be the guy that immediately figures that out.
No.
That's what happened last week. Windows updated. It changed one very insignificant setting, something that I didn't even know what it did. I never touched it. I always left it alone. It's starting to make me wonder now if that was the setting that was giving us problems for years, that it had really nothing or less to do with bandwidth and much more to do with the fact that that setting could do weird things. And it all had to do with how to tie the IP address to the overall simulcast that goes out to all of the platforms. So tonight we are streaming on all those platforms. We're on Instagram and TikTok. We are on Facebook and YouTube. We are not on Twitch. I'm done with Twitch. It's a useless platform. It never generates followers. It doesn't have any viewers. Why waste resources on a platform like that? So we're off of Twitch for good. I'm not going back to it. But the other platforms, we do have followers there. So there are people that prefer watching them on one or the other. The only other difference you're going to see tonight is that I'm not doing the dual stream. I think that also uses resources that overcomplicates the work that I have to do as the engineer, while I'm also your host and also trying to be somewhat coherent most of the time. I mean, that's not always easy to do, considering that, it's really a lot of multitasking here, and multitasking is not really good for no, it's not that it's bad for your brain. It's just your brain's not really designed for multitasking, particularly when you're doing intellectual work like this, because I have to answer your questions, right? Particularly in a show like tonight. And I don't really need to have my attention diverted by all these different things and all these flashing lights and everything. Thank God, you can thank God that I am an instrument-rated pilot, because I don't think if I had that training, I'd be able to do this right now. Honestly, I was always able to fly a land plane safely. And believe me, I had a lot of situations. I had my engine give out on me on takeoff once. I had my electrical system completely fail at night, where I had no lights inside or outside the cockpit. I had to use flashlights and a handheld radio. And there's another one where the front landing gear went flat on me, and so I had to land on the back without doing a tail strike. And despite all these emergencies, I always made it back home safely. So that's what I'm trying to do for you tonight: give you a show that gets you, keeps you home safe, and gives you a little entertainment and education on the side. So I think we're all set. We've got this figured out. That new setting is fixed in, and I'm going to check it every single episode now, just to make sure it doesn't get switched by the next Windows update. I can't even tell you how frustrating it was last week. My poor colleagues here had to listen to me bitch and moan for about 2 hours. But we're back here tonight.
We were bitching and moaning with you.
We're back here tonight, and we're gonna have a good time. So joining us from Australia, we have Father Chris Yates. How you doing tonight, Father?
I'm okay. I gave up trying to be coherent for Lent 10 years ago and never went back. So when you give up, it's kind of everything's all right.
I'm telling you, it came close. It came close. I was saying if I couldn't get this figured out, because this one was a real mystery to me. It's like, look, I've done everything. I have 2 gigabytes upload and download speed. What more do you want from me? I could not understand what the hell was wrong. And finally, with the help of AI, we've done some shows on AI in the last season or two, and it really was very useful here. It knew exactly what was wrong, interestingly enough, and it really did.
After you berated it for a
I
minute.
had to swear at it a few times.
Yeah, you had to slap it around a little bit to get it to concentrate.
I did. You're right.
Yeah,
I
after
forgot
that, you
about
got
that.
the answer we needed.
Yeah.
That was.
Well, that's because we're not millennials. If in doubt, give it a clout. That's the kind of that's the mantra.
Slap around a little bit, change the channel.
It's true. No, it's true. But we got it working, so I think we're okay. And going forward, I think we'll be okay because I know what to check now. And so if Windows updates, unless it does something else. But I think that was really the major setting. It's a very insignificant thing. It's not really explained. Streamlabs assumes that you're like this podcasting pro expert, which I am not. Like I said, I got into this work to be a pastor, not even a bishop, which we're going to talk about here in a minute. But I got into this to be a pastor, not a podcaster. So, you got to give me a break here. I'm not a broadcaster either, I mean, I have a very fast brain, but a very slow mouth, and having to try to get them to coordinate is not always the best thing. So, my brain's usually about 3 or 4 thoughts ahead of where my mouth happens to be. And
I have the opposite problem.
Yeah, the opposite.
Me too.
I think I better have the opposite. I think you probably sound a little bit more like you're with the program if you have the opposite problem. But anyway, we'll cancel each other out, Father. How about that tonight?
Sounds good.
All right, joining us from Tennessee, we have April Narad. How you doing tonight, April?
I'm doing good. I was thinking today is only Tuesday, but it feels like it should be Friday.
Right.
Well, I mean, every day feels like Monday to me. So I mean, honestly, I'm always one day away from a whole lot of work. So it's always Monday for me. But I mean, I can
Mondays
see.
are just terrible.
Yeah.
A whole week of Mondays.
That's my week. Usually just terrible is the only way to describe it. It's not really that bad. There's just so much work to get done. Never enough time, trying to get a lot of things taken care of, and it just doesn't always work the way you'd like it to. That's life, I guess. But I'm glad that you're here. I'm sorry for last week. I'm sorry for all of you, but not just our panel here, but also for our audience that waited patiently to get the stream back and running. But my panel here waited a whole hour because we're trying to see if we could run the show at 9:00, and it was not happening.
You redid it like 6 or 7 times.
We did several tests,
to get it figured out.
Which I also need to make sure everything was reset last week. So if one of the platforms says that this is a test, it's not a test. This is a real show. It's open lines, open topics for April 21st, 2026. Okay, so I don't know. It probably, because of the reset, there's probably another setting that I missed to get it back to showing you the correct title. I think it's fine on YouTube, but I want to say I had to switch it over on TikTok and Facebook. I don't think I can change anything on Instagram. So if you're on Instagram and it says test, this is not a test. It really is the show. The tests were last week, but it got mixed up in the resets that we did. Life is a test. Life is a test. It is. And maybe it is a little bit of a test. Maybe it is. I mean, because we're still kind of working it out. But right now we've got solid stream messages. Everything's on excellent, and it's a perfect stream. So I think we got it worked out. So let's see. Okay, so I've got a new segment for you before we get started with our normal first hour segment, which is questions from the ether. This one is called Internet Inquisition. It's to replace liturgical libation, since, again, to keep myself fresh and optimal, I'm trying to reduce anything that makes me relaxed and sleepy. So, alcohol is something I only drink when I'm ready to relax, and it just, doesn't mean that we're never going to do a liturgical libation. From time to time we will, but when I want to really be on the ball, and tonight I want to be on the ball, I just don't find that alcohol is really conducive to being on the ball. It makes me too sleepy, too relaxed.
And I tend to want more.
Yeah.
instead of just 1 dram, I end up wanting 1 or 2 or 3.
Right. So I've got a replacement a replacement segment for you. It's called Internet Inquisition. And
I think you should rename it Asshat Accusations.
well, we could.
I mean,
it's open.
We'll
We're open.
We'll let the fans decide.
Yeah, we'll let the fans decide. But see, the thing is, I just realized that, when you type in Bishop Bryan Ouellette on Google, you get a plethora of colorful commentary. And I thought, why not, spend some time actually exploring some of these things from week to week, particularly now that we have the 1-minute videos that definitely elicit new conversation, bringing new people to this channel and to the various things that we are, sharing, the various topics that some people might find strange or unusual for a bishop to talk about. And so obviously when people take it's just like Yelp, right? Very rarely do, if people are going to take the time to write up a review on a business or in this case, on a person, they're typically not going to do it because they are enamored with them. They'd rather only spend the time doing that if they want to criticize, so usually it's for a bad review or a bad thing. So I get a lot of bad reviews on me. And of course, most of the accusations are total bullshit. And I thought it would be fun to kind of look at some of these, of what's being said today. So here's your Internet Inquisition, or maybe asshat accusation. We'll see. But let's start first with, and I was actually going to show them. I might not. I mean, maybe I will at some point. But tonight, let's just read them. So this is an interesting one. So on this channel, we stream the Mass, right? The Mass for the Holy Nicolean Catholic Church. And 2 years ago, make sure you keep that in mind, we had the Vigil Mass for the 4th Sunday in Ordinary Time. This was 2 years ago. And 2 years ago, we received a message from a person that found this. Nobody that ever showed up to Mass before, just I guess, found the channel and decided they were going to put an outlandish comment on it. So they said, I'm not going to read it all because this one's not as important, but she says, there's no such thing as ordinary time in the Roman Catholic Church. January 27th is the Mass of St. John Chrysostom, Bishop, Confessor, Doctor of the Church. Mm-hmm. The purpose of vigil for Sunday Mass next day are only for those who need to travel on official duty on Sundays and will not be able to go to Sunday Mass without incurring mortal sin. The Church did not explain this to the laity. Those who are not exempted are committing mortal sin if they will stop going to Sunday Mass the next day to attend a Saturday night vigil. That is complete and total bullshit. Okay, the canons of the Church make it very clear that that the Church follows the Jewish tradition that at sundown it begins the day of the following day. So at sundown on Saturday, it is Sunday. That is a perfectly simple time. And yes, you can even extend that to the dusk or even, the late afternoon. And as some churches will sometimes do, a 5 o'clock vigil. We tend to have a 7 o'clock vigil. And in the summertime, sometimes the sun's still up a little bit. But, the fact of the matter is, it is perfectly valid. It is still counts as Sunday Mass, and it is not a mortal sin for a Catholic.
Well, thank God she added, I'm praying for anyone reading this that you will go check it out, what I'm saying, and see if it's true. Well, you're wrong.
Yeah.
So
I checked it out
embarrass
for
yourself.
you.
Sorry.
I checked it out for you. I don't have the canons. I had them last week because I was actually going to share this last week, but I lost my page. I don't know. It was on here, but it's gone now. I had the canons, but the fact of the matter is that is not true. So I came back 2 years ago, and my comment to her was, I think you walked into the wrong church. The Church of Elitist Eternal Dogmatism is a mile down the road on the left. That was how I answered her. So 2 days ago, last week, this was last week, okay, because like I said, this is what I was going to share with you last week if the show had gone through. So this was just literally about 9 days ago. Somebody dug out this old video from 2 years ago and read that comment, and they said, your comment is laughable considering that you have literally stolen everything from the quote-unquote elitist dogmatic church you reference to make your own in your basement. It's not my basement. Hate to break it to you. It used to be when we were in transition, but not actually. But that's not my basement either. It's just the first floor of my home. So which is it? You wanted to be married? You had some other vice that you disqualified you from the priesthood? There is always one for these guys who do this. It's almost like the people who dress up as police and buy the whole cop car and all then get an impersonation charge. LOL, I'm reading it verbatim, so please bear with the bad English. Why not just go Protestant instead of fool people using the Catholic name? Folks, if you need help to go read and watch real priests, exorcists like Father Chad Rippinger, you're dancing with something dangerous, entertaining things like this, or thinking you have the authority during exorcism, whatever that is, if it's a mental health issue instead. So I came back and I said this to him. I said, well, there's this thing called the Old Catholic Church, which kind of makes your accusations rather laughable. But anyway, I don't have time to give you a history lesson. Besides, I could ask you a similar question. Maybe you should become a Pharisee. I'm sure there are those in the church that would love a Reconstructionist movement like that. Because let's be honest with ourselves here. Christ really isn't your cup of tea after all, is he? What was it that Christ said about knowing them by their fruits? Have you eaten any of yours recently? I just did, and they have gone rotten, so I wouldn't recommend it. That's how I responded to that one. The fact of the matter is, these Catholics, and they're usually Catholics, they're almost always Catholics that get the worst.
Yeah, but they're
offenders.
uneducated Catholics.
Very uneducated, and that's what makes it
And
so
they think
ridiculous.
That they're going to be able to.
They're going to
trip
come
you
and
up?
educate me,
Right.
a bishop, about the church, and they don't even understand their own religion as a layperson, and they seem to forget that being an old Catholic bishop probably means I know more about how it works than even your Roman Catholic bishops who don't have to worry about the things that I do. Okay, so I probably know a little bit more about how this works than even they do, let alone the laity. But the fact of the matter is the Old Catholic Church, and I'm not going to, I can give you the canons if you want it. Maybe later in the show, I'll go dig those
Canon
out.
1248.
Thank you.
It's Canon 1248. A person who assists at Mass celebrated anywhere in the Catholic Rite, either on the feast day itself or in the evening of the preceding day, satisfies the obligation of participating in the Mass.
Okay, that's for the first part where she says there's no ordinary time, which is not true. Do you have the canon for what justifies that old Catholic priests and those that were validly consecrated as old Catholics, that even though they were not given?
I don't think that's canon. I think it's Lumen Gentium. I think it's in the document.
It is. Okay, you're right.
Council.
The canon is an inference. It basically says that as long as the person's a male and has been validly, or even if it wasn't, there's punished. That's what it was. The canon state that if a bishop were to consecrate another bishop without the endorsement of Rome, that bishop will incur penalties. And the point that this canon makes for old Catholics is they wouldn't need to incur penalties if it was invalid. The fact that it is valid is why they incur penalties. And then, as Father Chris said, there's other teachings on the church that are official documents that clearly state that old Catholics are valid, illicit,
I
but
always
valid.
find it amusing how when it comes to things like this that the popes, certainly from John the 23rd onwards, will happily walk around Westminster Abbey with even now a female Archbishop of Canterbury.
Oh yeah, they have no problems with it.
And there's no dramas with that. It's kind of weird that these sort of
they're threatened by us. They're not threatened by Protestants. They're threatened by us. They're not threatened by because Protestants, they're like, that's cute. They're cute. They're trying to be good Christians. But when it's the old Catholics, I mean, we've got the valid rights, and we're kind of a loose cannon to them as they see it. And
I guess family fights are always more brutal.
Yeah, I think so. I think that's a good way to explain it and describe it. And speaking of family fights, let me give you one more before we move on to the next segment here. And this one is from America Magazine. AmericaMagazine.org. I believe it's a Jesuit publication, if I'm not mistaken. They're taking donations and everything else. And I found this one just this last week. I did not know this existed, but it was published on October 31st, 2025, Halloween, of course. And the article is entitled "The Complicated Relationship Between Catholics and the Conjuring Horror Franchise." So I thought this is going to be interesting. Why is my name coming up under this? I wonder. Well, I know why, but I didn't know why I had to be the focal point of this article. And I am, because they start out talking about me, as you'll see here in a minute. All right. Let me read to you the parts that matter. I'm not going to read the whole thing because it's just the front part here that matters. Nothing gets us in the Halloween mood more than turning on a movie that will leave us with nightmares. But if you have to receive a blessing to see a film, is it really a good idea for Catholics to watch it? When moviegoers arrive at the Cinemark Far Town Center XD in Far, Texas, which is not where I was, but anyway, they got that part wrong. For a screening of the new horror film, The Conjuring Last Rites, they were greeted by an unexpected presence, a man in clerics, Bryan Ouellette. A viral video posted on August 28th shows Ouellette standing in front of the door to the auditorium, blessing moviegoers and handing out bottles of holy water and St. Michael the Archangel prayer cards, which are black and red and adorned with branding for The Conjuring on the back. But that part is true. There is a viral video on TikTok, got over 1.5 million views of me doing this at this particular event that they're talking about. Many of the nearly 8 million TikTok viewers of the video were quick to suggest that the presence of a priest at a horror movie screening might be a marketing ploy, with one commenter jokingly insinuating that Ouellette actually works in popcorn. Others expressed that Ouellette's blessings made them more afraid of the film. As one viewer put it, "I don't think I want to watch it after seeing this." They got a picture here. It's not even me. Marketing ploy or not, Ouellette considers himself a real clergyman and an exorcist. He is the quote-unquote patriarch of a group called the Holy Nicolaitan Catholic Church, which they link to, an independent, apostolic, esoteric Catholic church with no official relationship to the Roman Catholic Church. Ouellette is also part of the old Roman Catholic Sacred Order of St. Michael the Archangel, Order of Exorcists, which is also not recognized by the Vatican. According to the a short biography page provided by the Holy Nicolaitan Catholic Church website, Ouellette joined a Catholic seminary as a young man, but eventually, quote-unquote, realized that it would be impossible to accomplish his vocation within the limits imposed on him by the Roman Catholic Church. Ouellette is not a Roman Catholic priest, but his presence at the Conjuring Last Rites screening and his co-option of items and traditions associated with the Catholic faith add to a long-standing and complicated relationship between the Conjuring franchise and the real-life Catholic Church, one that is characterized by a capitalization on Catholic imagery without Catholic endorsement. As they go on, they talk about another priest that had been brought in who was a real Roman Catholic Church, a real Catholic priest who blessed the Conjuring 1 set. I blessed the Conjuring 3 set, and I came to the Conjuring 4 premiere for this event. But when they were talking about the Catholic priest that was brought in to bless the Conjuring 1 movie, he was a Roman Catholic priest, and this article refers to him as a real Catholic priest. In other words, the one that you started out talking about, this Bryan Ouellette guy who believes himself to be a real clergyman is not a real clergyman. This is written by a Jesuit publication, okay? So I'd like to think that the authors that they're hiring for their magazine, this online magazine, actually has some kind of background in understanding the relationship between the Roman Catholic Church and the Old Catholic Church. You'd think they would have at least some basic understanding about how what the Vatican teaches on this, and that calling me less than real or less than authentic is a complete lie. In fact, that is, I would say, a libelous statement to make, because it's not correct. And you're pushing it and you're presenting it as though it is correct. So I really hope one of you will hear this. Maybe I need to actually write this publication and set them straight on what it is that they say about me. But this is a common thing that I encounter all the time. All right, it's all the time. So much so that I think we've got 2 free episodes left at the end of this season. I might choose to do one of them on the actual history of the old Catholic Church, the independent sacramental movement.
I think that'd be a good idea.
I think it would, to educate people in how it is valid but not licit, and that means that while it's not legal under the Church of Rome, it is a valid. They are valid holy orders. We don't care about the laws of the church. Do you care about the laws of China? China has all these communist laws. Do you care as a Western citizen? Do you care? I don't. As an American, I don't care what laws China comes up with, because I'm not bound by those laws. I live my own life here. So that's the way it is in the old Catholic Church. I'm not bound by what the Church of Rome decides to do. Anything that the Church of Rome decides to do, I will, as the patriarch, the actual patriarch, the real patriarch of this church, and a real bishop too, I will make my own assessment as to what parts of the Church of Rome apply to this tradition. That's how the Orthodox do it, and that's how I do it. There's no mystery here, okay? And as Father Chris said, makes a great point, they will walk hand in hand with with this female Archbishop of Canterbury. They're fine with that. But with me, I'm the devil incarnate. And, and it's all based on this kind of ignorance. I had this conversation with another guy on one of the other videos. I'm not going to go into that one. It would take too long. Maybe if we do a show on the ISM later in the season, I'll talk more about it.
I think there is one quick useful distinction that could help, which is to say that since there was the CDF, the Congregation for the Doctrine of the Faith in 1987 made a statement about the old Catholic churches, essentially saying, valid but illicit, in a similar way to the Oriental churches and the Orthodox churches. Mm-hmm. But I think, the Orthodox and Catholic churches are in schism with one another. And so the way it operates, look, the Western Church operates on a more legalistic structure than the Eastern churches. And so they would say, if you have been baptized, confirmed as a Catholic in your childhood, if you then go to an Orthodox church or an old Catholic church or a Brazilian Catholic church, in my case, then you're committing an act of schism. So although the sacraments are valid, they are illicit for you, because these are churches not in full communion with the Holy Father, which you are in communion with from birth, even though you might have had very little to do with it. Your parents might have just had you baptized. That's very different from, and I think in fairness, I mean, your church is good at this. People who come from no Christian background or non-Catholic backgrounds going to your churches. So they're not committing an act of schism because they've never been Roman Catholics.
That's a good point.
So I think that's a useful distinction for people to consider.
And I think it's also important for me, off of what you just said, to remind everyone out there that when we aid a Roman Catholic, we send them back to their own Roman Catholic parish.
Of course.
We don't keep them. We don't collect Roman Catholics and take them away. We get them straight. See, usually what it is, and I'm going to be a little harsh here, but it's the truth. Usually what it is that Rome did something, the Church of Rome did something that pissed them off, pushed them away, made them feel isolated, whatever. And they left. And
or just didn't offer a service.
Or didn't offer a service. I mean, there's lots of possibilities, but a lot of time when you talk to them, it's usually because there's bad blood there, and they just fell away. They didn't get anything out of it anymore. They fell away. Then they found me, and then they started paying attention. It's like then it reignites a spark within them, something that I might say at my mass on the YouTube stream, or something I say on this show perhaps, or maybe something they read about me. The good stuff, because there's good stuff too, and we'll talk about some good stuff in future episodes. I was just giving you the bad tonight, but they'll see this, and then they'll say, I want to find my way back, but they don't know what to do, and so they call, and they make an appointment to come to the retreat house, and they receive sacraments, and then the next thing I know, I get an email from them that they're going back to church every Sunday. In the Roman Catholic Church or the Orthodox Church, whatever is appropriate. And this is what this church did. So I don't know about you, but I'd say that's as Christ-like as it gets. And if you think I'm evil, I'm not the one that drove them away. I'm the one that reeled them back in and gave them back to you. So
when I was an Anglican priest, I did the same thing.
Did you really? Yeah.
I was always in I was always in the Catholic tradition of the Church of England, and often, for example, people might have not liked their parish priest, right?
Yeah.
Well, that's not really a very good reason to fall out with God,
Right.
And so, he's nasty, he says horrible things, and all the rest of it. I'm going to start coming to your church, and I said, well, don't think that this is diet church. Don't think this is church light. So if you're going to start coming to my church, then I have higher expectations of you as a cradle Catholic, that I will see you at confession every Saturday morning, and so don't think you're coming here to have an easy time.
Right.
And I strongly recommend you go back. So,
I mean, that's what you
not only
do.
did I encourage them to go. I didn't just tell them to go back. I said, well, it might be harder here. So you might
I mean, and honestly, it could be. I mean, I know that people think that, we're probably loosey-goosey because, we don't have the weight of Rome, upon us, forcing us to do things a certain way.
We also don't have the burden of all that administration. I mean, my very good friends and Catholic bishops and priests, and my goodness, I mean, I'm not surprised they have no time for ministry. It's just crazy, the sort of the administrative burden. And I mean, you have some of that, but we're largely released from that, which is probably why we're more available.
I mean, I try. We've got a good system going, despite the fact that with more staff we could do it a lot more efficiently and perhaps a lot better. But I just wanted to make this clear to everybody out there as to what we're really all about. So when you see these articles that say that I'm not a real priest, I'm not a real bishop, I'm a fake, I created my own church, I've made this all up. All of it is absolutely a lie. I was validly consecrated by a validly consecrated bishop in a valid tradition with valid rites. Everything was done validly. I was very specific about, making sure that everything was perfect, and so was he. Okay, so the whole point here is that this was not done for any vanity reasons. It was done to be at service in a particular capacity, and I did not create this church. I was given this responsibility, and I didn't want it, but I was given it anyway. I didn't want the episcopacy either. I really just wanted to be a priest, but this is the direction the vocation went. Okay, so when you read this stuff, keep this stuff in mind and understand that Catholicism is much larger than the Church of Rome. And I like calling it the Church of Rome, not only because it is the correct name of the actual historical church that it represents, but I don't like the way that they monopolize the term Catholic as though it's their own personal trademark, because Catholicism is larger than all of it. And the Nicene Creed, when it says we believe in one holy Catholic and Apostolic Church, Orthodox people say that, even some Protestants say that. The higher churches in Protestantism use that term. That's the kind of Catholic we are.
Baptists say it.
Yeah, Baptist.
The Nicene Creed is the basic statement of Christian faith. So
exactly.
Even Baptists, I mean, they might only do it once a year, whereas we do it every Mass.
Right, but they still believe it.
Yeah,
and they still say it.
Yeah, cool. Well, you have to, otherwise you're not a Christian.
Right. Well, you can tell the Mormons and the Jehovah's Witness about that, but they would argue that point. But the point I'm making is that we call it the Church of Rome because it is one iteration. Perhaps it is the most beautiful, largest, most historically significant Catholic iteration that exists, but it is still just one of many iterations. And just because we're not
within itself,
well, they got the different rights and everything.
They've got the 12 other parts of the Catholic Church, the Melkites, the Maronites.
Exactly.
So most people, especially in English-speaking Western nations, it's just lazy. It's lazy terminology.
It is lazy.
They think Catholic Church means only the Roman Catholic
yes,
Church.
which is why I call it the Church of Rome. I try not to call it the Roman Catholic Church. I mean, even I will use that, but it is more correctly referred to as the Church of Rome, and we are not under their authority. Okay, we're not. I have several apostolic lines in my apostolic. In the lineage of my apostolic succession that goes back to the Church of Rome, but I also have some that go to the Russian church, the Russian Orthodox Church, the Greeks. All right, I mean, we have several lines. I even have an Anglican line, Father, for your benefit. So the thing is,
I've left that behind.
I know. Yeah, I'm just rattling it. But the point is that I'm trying to make is that don't buy into this erroneous well, it's basically propaganda that says that Catholic is the Vatican. And that Catholic is just one, the Vatican is just one type of Catholic. Lots of different types of Catholic, and they're all valid as long as they receive. Now, okay, let me qualify that. As long as the orders were validly conferred with a valid rite, they are valid, okay? Yeah, there are ISM churches that are ultra-liberal that have abandoned sacramental theology. They are not valid. All right, they will call themselves part of they'll say they're the such and such Catholic Church, you know, of the
They tend to be a lot more politically involved.
Yes.
Almost changing it into a political ideology.
Well, that's probably why they got into it. But that would, you have to, so the Church of Rome has a valid reason for being cautious, because there are ISM churches that are not valid, but most of them are. If they take it seriously, they are. Old Catholics tend to take it seriously. Okay. And
well, except the main body of old Catholics in Europe ordained women. So
yeah,
you know, not all, of course. I mean, so that.
But that doesn't mean though that they're invalid as a church. It just means that they're doing invalid things.
Yeah, I mean, what it would, the problem comes. I mean, look, it doesn't invalidate the orders that already exist, but the problem, it's like with the Church of England. I mean, without getting into that mess, but the problem is you may be a man that's been ordained by a man, but somewhere along that
it could be a woman in there.
A woman's in, then that's it. So you end up in this having to put your family tree at the back of the church. I used to have to do it too.
Yeah.
You put your family tree at the back of the church to show your lineage all the way back to St. Peter, which I can do. But it's you know, that's why there is safety in the Church of Rome, and the Catholic Church is in communion with it, and also in the Orthodox churches, which you know, clearly and explicitly have valid orders. So it's true to say that if you're going to an old Catholic, or I'm part of the ICAP, the Brazilian Catholic Church, it's less prevalent in that they've broken with sacramental norms. But it does mean that you sort of, you know, we have to qualify ourselves a little bit more.
For those who care about such things, all 21 of my lines of apostolic succession, there's not one female name in there. If you care about these things.
Oh, no.
You know, no, I'm not talking about you. I'm not talking about you, Paul. I'm talking about if there's a Roman Catholic out there thinking that, oh, he's got to be invalid somewhere. I can promise you I'm not. Okay, I'm not.
It's on the website. You can look at it
You can
yourself.
look it up. It's all up there. All 21 lines are up on our website, esotericcatholic.org. Now, if you go... Now, one last thing, okay, that I think is also important to keep in mind here. Because this person that accused me of being laughable and stealing all this stuff from the church. I'm a Catholic, okay? I didn't steal anything. I'm using what the Catholic faith is. So that's not stealing. It's not appropriating. I was baptized a Catholic, okay, in the Church of Rome, no less, okay? So maybe, yeah, you could accuse me of being schismatic, okay? Mea culpa. The fact is,
so I'm not.
Yeah, you're okay. Yeah, you're okay. You're okay. So here's the thing. All right, I did not become a priest in the old Catholic Church, the ISM, because I had a vice that I couldn't justify. I was already married by this point, so there was that aspect of it, but I could have pursued things through Orthodoxy or through maybe one of the Eastern Catholic churches in Europe, because they do ordain married men, so it wasn't even about that, okay? What it really came down to in the end was that God called me to a very specific vocation, and that vocation does not exist within the Church of Rome. You know what that vocation is? It is casting a wider net. All the people that fall through the cracks of the establishment, we catch them and we help them come back. And that there's nobody in the Church of Rome doing that. There's no one in any of the established churches, or the really big established churches, doing that. We do it, okay? And I think that that's why God did this. All right, I didn't ask for this. I did not ask for this. Believe me, I wanted to be an investment banker. I didn't want to do this, I didn't want to do this. You know how I like to eat and drink and travel? I mean, honestly, I could have lived a much better life doing that all the time if I had pursued something other than this. Do you really think I wanted to fake being a bishop so bad that I would waste my time doing this all the time just to put some image out there that I'm something that I'm not? You think I'm nuts? I guess you do. I guess you really think I'm crazy. But no, the fact of the matter is I was called by God and I answered the call, much to my dismay, because I really didn't want to do it. And I did it anyway because God said, God said this is what he wanted. And I wanted to say yes. That's all it came down to.
I mentioned Lumen Gentium earlier, and I really encourage people to read it. Lumen Gentium was the document on the doctrine of the church that was issued at the Second Vatican Council. And it really is an amazing document on describing the action of the church.
Yeah.
And partly the motivation for writing it is exactly what you just said. It's to acknowledge. I mean, before this, there was very much the development was from, outside the Church of Rome. There's nothing. It's just doom. And of course, this doesn't change anything. This was the Catholic Church acknowledging that was never the case, and it changed. I'll be very technical now. It changes it from saying, the Catholic Church is the Church of Christ to saying the Church of Christ subsists in the Catholic Church, which is a very subtle but important, acknowledgement of what is obviously the truth, and it acknowledges that God is at work. Everywhere.
Yeah.
There's nowhere on earth where God is not at work. And therefore, people who are cooperating with God's grace are part of the Church of Christ, albeit they may not be in full communion with the Church of Rome. So, I mean, it's a long document, but I encourage people to read it. It's not impenetrable, it's that you don't need a doctorate to be able to read it. And it might sort of, especially people who are angst-ridden about these things, it might assuage your fears.
Well said, Father. Thank you. So, April, I know that we've gone high into this hour, and we've got 3 questions from the ether. So what I'd like to do, since this is an Open Lines, Open Topic show, is let's start with questions of the ether. And I know I've seen questions coming in from the stream.
Got a few.
So, by all means, everyone that's watching us out there, whether you're on Instagram, TikTok, Facebook, or YouTube, our moderators are watching for your questions. I might not see them all. I do have a multi-stream up on here, but it's hard to watch that and do this show at the same time. So by all means, ask your questions. They might be answered later in the show, but log them now, and you can also call into the show. I'll have that phone number up on the screen in the 2nd and 3rd hours, so watch for that. We'd much rather hear from you on the phone than to just read what you have to say in the chat. It's more personal, but it's your choice. If you're more comfortable doing it in the chat, that's perfectly fine. Most people are. So what we're going to do here is we've got our questions from the ether that we do on every episode. We'll start with those, and then if they bleed into the next segment, the next hour, that's fine too, because we'll get to everybody's questions tonight, I'm pretty sure. We usually do. I think very rarely have we ever not been able to get through. But Father Chris, by the way, put in on YouTube the document that he's referring to, which deals with a lot of the things we're talking about tonight. Okay, so be sure to click that. Don't read it now. Watch the show and read it after the show, okay?
Sorry.
Everyone's going to be reading that, and we'll be like, nobody's paying attention to
Put
us.
it on your clipboard.
No worries. All right, April, what's the first question from the ether tonight?
So the first question comes from Jay, and it asks, how can I explain to a 4-year-old that Jesus died for our sins on a cross, then was buried, then came back to life in 3 days, then went to heaven, but is still alive?
Okay. So I'm going to give you something that might be controversial, but I'm always been of the opinion that we should not treat children, even young children, as incompetent or as imbeciles. I think we should give them intelligent answers to intelligent questions.
Well, they comprehend a lot more than we give them
Far
credit
more.
for.
And I
Yeah.
can tell you from my own personal experience, when I remember going into, because even though I was baptized Catholic, we never went to church. So Catholic imagery was not something I got to see a whole lot, except if I went to some of my older great aunts that were still practicing Catholics, and if you've ever been to a person from that generation's home who's Catholic, I mean, it looks like it might as well be a shrine because they got saints and statues everywhere, crucifixes that are the size of what you'd see in a church, just there in the wall, and very graphic, bloody, and everything else. So it was, kind of unusual to me. And I remember being in about that age, 4 years old, looking at it, being like, "Mom, what is that? What does that mean?" And she actually would sit down and tell me the story of the Passion of Christ. And I want to say, to my memory, she didn't water it down any, and she didn't make it stupid or sanitize it. She kept it real. One of the things that I would say was the right thing to do. And so my answer to Jay here is, I would start by explaining that heaven isn't where the dead go, but rather what the living awaken into. I think it is important for even children that age to understand that death is a reality. Now, they won't have object permanence in the same way that adults do, or older children even, but they can understand that there is a certain impermanence to things. Maybe they can't understand absolute impermanence, but they can understand the idea that somebody could be here and might not be here tomorrow. They might lose a pet or a grandparent or something, and then death becomes a conversation. There's no reason that you should hide the fact that this is something that happens to us all. It's a natural process, and you have, as a Christian, an added benefit that you can talk about it with the solution in mind. You don't have to leave it and just say, "Oh yeah, we all died. Too bad. Sorry." You can say that, this place, we call it life, but it's not life. This is just a taste of life. It's a moment in the grand scheme of eternity to just simply be able to take an opportunity to find the grace of God and follow after it. And if you do, then you awaken to what real life is. And that's what we call heaven. So you don't have to explain it as like where the dead go. It's not where the dead go. Don't look at it that way, because that's not what it is. Heaven's where there's no dead people in heaven. All right? Not one dead person in heaven. Only the living get to go there. All right? The rest of us, that's for us to choose. That's what working out one's salvation is all about. That's what the church militant's all about. But they're the church triumphant. They've woken to the truth of life, and they have it in its most perfect form. So no, heaven's for the living, not for the dead. And that's a very important thing to explain to a child, or actually any Christian. It's important for any Christian to understand that. I hate the fact that that's what people will say. "Oh, heaven's where the dead go." They do not go to heaven. The dead go to hell. We talked about annihilationism, okay? That's how I look at it, all right? That's how the Bible looks at it. Now, you can infer, if you want to take the traditional way of seeing hell as this eternal punishment, fine. Go ahead. I'm not going to stop you. But as far as I'm concerned, the simplest answer is usually the best. And the simplest way I look at it is that where you go when you die? Well, you go to hell, unless you have grace, and then you go to live. And that's eternal life. That's what the Bible calls it. That's what Jesus referred to it as. And that's what it really is. That's what the kingdom of heaven really is. And there is no reason why you can't explain that to a 4-year-old any more than you could explain it to a 44-year-old.
4-year-olds are concrete thinkers, so
Yeah.
If you say something, then it's just true. It does require some care, but I think I've had many 4-year-olds of my own. I think I'd say God created us because He loves us. People have been naughty, and so. That meant that they had to suffer. And so God decided to become one of us and suffer in our place. And so because He died even though we die, because God died on a cross, He's killed death, so we'll live forever with Him. I think I'd leave it as simple as that.
Yeah, that's good.
I wouldn't say too much, but to a 4-year-old, I wouldn't say too much more than that. But you've got that, you've told the truth in a way that, so because they're concrete thinkers, you've said nothing there that isn't real and true. They're not going to understand nuance and all the rest of it. Follow-up questions may come. I doubt it from a 4-year-old. And then you practice the faith. So you've got that concrete thinking in their mind, and then take them to church every Sunday and Holy Day of Obligation to reinforce it. and then as they grow, they can ask the more nuanced questions. And when the church completely screws up answering those questions, they can call in this show.
Yeah, there you go.
And they will. They'll screw up. They always do. That's why we're here. But, that's what this ministry is. So, I mean, if you have a problem with this church, you're going to have to really bitch at God. Go complain to him, okay? Because he's the one that started it. He's the one that put me in this position. If you don't like the fact that I'm here, you're going to have to bitch at him, all right? Not at me, because I really didn't want to do it. I really didn't. But I'm here because he asked me to, okay? Hard for you to believe or understand if you don't understand how vocations work and discernment. But, again, these are things that your church should be teaching you. So go and learn it. All right, April, what's our next question?
The next question comes from Andrew, and he asked, what are some of the limitations of classical theism such that the cosmic master could not really be categorized as one? There are questionable positions like God did not create another universe because he does not will to do so. But who today would think this is the only universe?
Well, I mean, okay, so these are largely, and as I've learned, as both a professional philosopher, for lack of a better vocational term, and also as a bishop. Okay, these are problems that are largely matters of semantics. They're people think they know what words mean. They use modern terms, modern definitions. They use ancient terms, ancient definitions, and they're mixing and matching, and no one's explaining anything, and everyone thinks they know what everyone's talking about. No one knows anything. That's what happens with semantics. This is the biggest problem why religions fight, because it's usually arguments about semantics, but because everything's so dogmatic as they approach speech, and nobody's really qualifying anything they're saying, that you run into these kinds of things. I'm going to say it much more simplistically. Who is qualified to say what creation is in reality? We can speculate, but we don't really know what creation is, other than we know that we're having an experience here, and creation is part of that experience, if not all of that experience, but we don't even know the difference between those two things. We just know that God created something. Here we are, and we're able to testify to that creation because we can observe it. Why can't creation be a multiverse? And who's qualified to say otherwise? I mean, look, I get really frustrated with people when they start arguing, oh, God didn't do this. How do you know what God did? I mean, all you know.
Were you there?
Yeah, were you there? What you got? The Bible. Okay, the Bible's great, but what is the Bible? It's a manual for finding salvation. It is not an encyclopedia of everything God did. In fact, it even tells you that it's not that. How many times does the book say, there were many other things that Jesus did, but it said and did, but not all could be contained. Yeah, it's right there. So we already know from the actual writers of the Bible that this is not a comprehensive explanation for creation. What it is a manual for salvation. And I'm going to even rein it in more. I'm going to say it's a manual for salvation for Homo sapiens. We don't know how it works on other planets, assuming there's life on other planets, which I do think there is. But we don't know the relationship they have with God versus how we do. Maybe there's planets that didn't fall. We tend to be so egocentric that we think that we are still the center of the universe. I mean, it's like Galileo never happened or something. I mean, we still think that the universe revolves around us. From the point of view that we're so important to God that he would send Christ, I guess that is true. But we don't know what God's doing in other places, and it's completely his prerogative to decide.
Maybe we're
what he
isolated for a reason.
I mean, maybe we're just that unhinged that he's like, I'm going to have to put these people in this black void somewhere.
You're in timeout.
I mean, yeah,
Homo sapiens, you're in timeout.
And let's put a law of the speed of light so they can't get anywhere.
Your little fleshy bodies can't handle space.
What's that?
Or maybe we are the only sentient life in the universe. I mean, that's just as likely. Like,
we don't know.
The premise of the question.
It's not statistically likely. It's not statistically likely, but it is a possibility. It is a possibility.
I mean, and I'm not against the possibility. It wouldn't affect my faith at all. But the idea that you sit there and go, who today would think there's only one universe? Well, it's just as reasonable to say there's one universe as to say there's infinite universes. Because you can only experience one universe, and you're not going to experience another one in your lifetime, I promise you. Mm-hmm. So, for all the reasons you've just said, physics. I just say, be aware of your own groupthink. Be aware of your own context, because I don't think people living in Calcutta make the assumptions that you do.
That's a good one. I like that one. Calcutta. All right. All the way to India. All right. We're going to take our first break here. When we come back, more of your questions. Don't go away. Welcome back, everyone, to the second hour of Vestiges After Dark. We're going to do one more question from the ether that is left over from the last hour, and then we will continue with all of your questions. I hope you've been logging them in the chats, and we're going to start taking your calls as well. If you're interested in asking us a question directly, you can call right into the show. I'll have that number up on the screen shortly. It's 207-544-1983. That's 207-544-1983. I'll take you on the air. Don't go away. Okay, so April, what is our next question from the ether, our last one from the ether, and then we'll get to the questions in the chat.
The last question is, I've been analyzing the whole Son of Man concept across Scripture, Ezekiel, Daniel, and then the Gospels. I feel like there's a progression there. How does the church understand that? And is it just about Jesus, or is there something in it about what it means for us to relate to God too?
I mean, this is a nice theological question, and the answer is that it's both. It's both, honestly, and this is by design. It's actually a progression for theosis. Okay, this is a tenet of Eastern Christianity, orthodoxy, that basically states, and you've heard me say this a lot if you've been following me for many years, God became man so that man can become God. Well, this Son of Man concept is how that progression happens. So in Ezekiel, you have a description of humanity in its weakness, and then in Daniel, you have a description of humanity exalted, and then in Jesus, you have humanity united with God. So it's the perfect progression of theosis. It's the story of salvation is what it is. So, I think that if you're looking at it in isolation, if you're reading these things, these concepts outside of the context of the entire Bible, these are going to be elusive. It's going to seem kind of confusing. Like, why is Daniel talking about the Son of God? That doesn't sound like Jesus, but then Jesus calls himself that. It can be confusing if you don't understand contextually how it all fits together. But remember, the Bible is a collection of independent stories written by numerous writers. Sometimes one book is written by several writers and spanning thousands of years between them. These are all inspired and gathered together, collected into the canon, because it gives us a series of faith accounts that show us how God interacts with his creation, how he cares for it, and how he has set it up for salvation. And Jesus is the culmination of all that. So there's a lot of foreshadowing of Jesus in the Old Testament, and not just what would be typical written in the prophets or story discussions of the Messiah or anything else, but even deeper than that. In fact, orthodoxy is really good. Orthodox theology is really good at trying to demonstrate how often Jesus shows up in the Old Testament as an actual actor within the story, something that a lot of Christians aren't really familiar with. And I mean, I know that we've had a question on the Nicolean Network that sort of relates to this, where it was asked, if Jesus wasn't born yet, how could he have been doing this? Well, again, Jesus has always been, right? He was begotten, not made.
Eternally begotten.
Eternally begotten, right. And so his birth was just an expression of his incarnation. But that's God incarnating humanity, and then he's born in the same way that we are. That doesn't mean that's where he started. So he was involved in creation.
The term Son of Man is really important, actually. The motif, or put it this way, if you look at the Gospel of Mark, there's the so-called Markan secret, right? That throughout Mark, the Gospel of Mark, Jesus is telling people, keep it to yourself. Like, don't be quiet. Don't reveal this. But actually, the first verse of the Gospel of Mark is the Gospel of Jesus Christ, Son of God. Okay, it says Son of God. Now that's a political statement, because of course Son of God was the title given to the Roman emperor.
Mm-hmm.
And so this is a subvert saying, so in other words, the title Son of God is not specifically messianic. It's simply saying, this guy is a rival to Caesar, or more important than Caesar. But the term Son of Man, because it does relate directly back to Daniel, when Jesus calls himself the Son of Man, essentially that's what gets him crucified, because that's him saying, I'm the Messiah.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Son
Right.
of Man is the messianic claim. Now, because of language and the development of history, we think Son of God is a bigger claim than Son of Man. But actually, Son of Man is the messianic claim. That's the one that gets him crucified. Call yourself Son of God might have got you crucified by the Romans for being opposed to the emperor, but it wouldn't have had the Hebrews shouting for you to be crucified. So Son of Man really is the messianic term. And so you're right. What we should, when we hear Son of Man, we should hear God incarnate. And a lot of Christians get this wrong. Oh, Jesus is God's son, as though, and we've heard it in the question, as though he was sort of born in time, and that's when he was created. And of course, this is the ancient heresy of Arianism. And so no, this is the Trinity is a very difficult mystery for us to get our heads around. But the shorthand version is that God is Father, uncreated, Son, eternally begotten, Holy Spirit, proceeding. So now they're unsatisfactory explanations on the surface level, but they're deeply satisfactory when you start applying the corpus of Scripture, the philosophy and theological thinking throughout time. And so Son of Man is a very, very, like, you've actually nailed a really, whoever asked the question, nailed a really important motif in the New Testament. It is the most explicit statement, amongst the most explicit statements Jesus makes, of saying, I am in fact the Messiah.
Yeah, that's exactly right. And as Mason said in the chat, which is, I guess, an important thing, look up the theological term theophany, because that is the official term that's given to all of the appearances of Jesus in the Old Testament, which would be not Jesus in the man sense, but in the second person of the Holy Trinity sense. That sometimes when the Old Testament refers to an angel of the Lord appeared, and Orthodoxy often considers that to be a theophany, believe it or not. Not in all cases, but in many cases it is.
By the way, I mean, we also have the Transfiguration, where so we get Moses appearing in the New Testament too.
Yeah, that's true.
And so you're right. I mean, so we talk about what we rightly say is the incarnation, when God the Son takes on flesh. That's the incarnation, but that's not when God the Son is created.
It's why I cringe when people, and even the church does this, and I try to avoid the prayer at Mass and do the other one, because they usually get two options, and I always forget. But I can't stand when people refer to Christmas as Jesus's birthday. It's not his birth. First of all, it wasn't December 25th. Almost certainly. And second of all, we don't, it's basic, it's the nativity.
It's the nativity.
It's a very different thing from a birthday. But one of the prayers in the, for the Mass on Christmas, it's the birthday. And it's like, no, I got to remember. We got to cross that one out. And just put a note.
In a classical sense, birthdays are like Natus, from where we get nativity. Is being born. It is the birth of Jesus. But it's not birthday in the way that, we have candles and a cake.
Well, that's what I'm thinking. When you hear birthday, you think of happy birthday to you. You know what I mean? It's like, that's not what we mean.
Churches where they do that, and
I know.
I leave.
I know. Yeah, you want to run for the door, shoot for the hills. All right, calling in from the 931 area code, which I think is a Tennessee number. Hello, you are on the air with Vestiges After Dark.
Hi, yes, it is a Tennessee number.
Hi, how you doing? Is this Brandon?
I'm good. How are you? Yeah,
Brandon.
Why did you come into the Zoom room?
Got off work.
Oh, okay.
Early-ish, but then I had to deal with 2 hours of traffic, and that was not working out for me.
Oh, okay. No worries. Well, I'm glad you're here. Everyone misses you, by the way. Everyone misses you, by the way, Brent. I just want to say that. Everyone loves April, and she's been doing a great job. But you're missed. You are missed.
Yeah, I know. I wish I could be on Vestiges more often, but my job just does not let me.
I understand that. I understand. So, what is your question? I don't want to derail you.
Yeah, so we're about to do a Bible study on Thursday about this topic, and it's about Second Kings 3, the Israelite, Judahite, and Moabite coalition. And so my question is, to what extent does Second Kings 3 kind of reflect an earlier worldview in which national deities like Chemosh and God were understood to operate in real opposition rather than a later fully developed monotheism?
Well, this gets us into trouble when we talk
good
about
old
it.
Brandon, always
Yeah.
simple questions.
We have to remember, okay, that
Most of our viewers have not read this book like in the last 10 minutes. So.
yeah. I mean, Father Chris, you probably have a nice way to kind of sum it up, but let me say this. We have to read all of the Old Testament through the lens of the people that were involved in that context, okay? So a lot of the world in which the ancient Israelites lived were surrounded by pagan forces, or what we would consider to be pagan civilizations. And they had their own gods, their own deities. And so sometimes when the Bible's referring to a particular perspective, it will almost talk about it as if these other gods are existent things. Now, there are people, there are historians that do feel, I should say this because we've had discussions on the Nicolean Network about this. There are historians that feel that Judaism, the ancient Israelites, well, the Judaism that we know today evolved out of a more ancient system where there were an understanding of there being several gods, but only one that was superior, which became, of course, the God that of the Jews and Christians. But the church does not take that perspective. The church feels that ancient Israelites were always monotheistic, and that any examples of polytheism in the Old Testament are just referencing the perspectives of these other civilizations that they were surrounded by. So there wouldn't have been like gods kind of going up against other gods if the church's interpretation of these older stories holds true. I think it's up to you whether or not, you got to looking at it from both perspectives. Both are valid from a historical vantage point, but only one is valid from a theological standpoint. So theologically speaking, the ancient Israelites were monotheists, always were monotheists. They were competing in a world that was very polytheist. And the point of the Old Testament was to bring them to an understanding that these other gods were really just misrepresentations of other forces. The fathers of the church refer to them as demons. They actually considered all these other gods talked about in the Old Testament to be demons. You can take that vantage point. I personally think that would have been a valid opinion back then. I don't think it's as valid today. I think what people have done, and I think you can see this very clearly in European paganism, particularly Greek and Roman paganism, is that people worshipped the powers of God instead of the actual God. So if God acted within the world, they would worship that action instead of the God, and they would see that action as a different God. So like if God helped you win a war, well, then you would say the God of war did that. If God helped you to find your spouse, then you'd say the goddess of love did that. But these are just the powers of God interacting with humanity in such powerful ways. They feel like independent forces when in reality, they're all emanating from the exact same God, the only God. And I think the Jews did always understand that. I personally do not subscribe to the belief that they felt that there were other deities, but only one was worth their time. I don't think that that's how they would have seen it. But then again, there are historians that disagree with that. Father Chris, what are your thoughts on this one?
I think the monotheism. Okay, first of all, I put it in the chat. Biblical scholars exist. Thank God.
Yeah.
For a reason.
Because you know, and I put a bit of a straw man in the chat because, you know, the reformers didn't really think that, you know, oh, let's just translate the Bible into the vernacular, everyone could just understand it.
Yeah.
You know, certainly Martin Luther didn't think that.
Yeah.
You know, these things are difficult. So, and I'm going to use something that's going to sound dangerously postmodern, which for those of you who got to know me will know I don't really like such things, but you can apply different criticisms to texts. And so now the unique thing about the scriptures is that they survive these criticisms. Like, you know, if you apply feminist criticism, for example, to the Quran, it doesn't really come out very well. But that's just a really easy example. But and you should read the Quran, by the way. You know, don't criticize something you've not read. But what we're looking at and what you've done is you can apply historic archaeological criticism, historic criticism of the text, in which you then look at something like the Book of Kings and say, well, what were the people that wrote this thinking? That's what that basic question is, and what's around them. And so in that context, you can say, well, and I actually believe that the monotheism of the Israelites was a slow burn. Like, I mean, I think from the get-go, there is a monotheism in as much as, you know, on the mountain, Moses meets with God and he says, you know, there is no other God but me. But it is what marks them out as distinctive as compared to all of the tribes around them. So again, you've described that, and we've got this going on in Kings. So that's the historic criticism says, let's try and get into the mind of that tribe of the Israelites at that time. Of course, that's an impossible task because we don't know how people thought 3,000 years ago. But, you know, we can look at archaeology and the interactions between peoples, and we've got the text themselves to base things on. In that context, I think you can say, just as certain indigenous groups today will say, oh, there's a god of the storm, right? There's a god in the cloud. Or even, you know, in the 19th century, you know, the god in the machine. So it depends on what we mean by God. But we don't mean Deus. We don't mean Yahweh.
A competitor. It's not a competitor to.
No, exactly.
Yeah.
So even in that historic sense now, and then of course we can a different form of criticism is to say, well, what is Catholic teaching today, which is in light of the gospel of the incarnation of God as man? How do we then look back at this through that lens? So they're different. It's not to say this is right and this is wrong. It's to say, look, all of these things are useful tools, but again, if the question we're trying to ask ourselves is, how can I have right belief, orthodoxy? How can I have right belief in my time? Then go to the Catholic understanding. Go to what has, you know, come through the lens of the scriptures. If what you're trying to do is, you know, explore the question, can I find out more about this group of people at this particular point in time? Go to the historical criticism. It's not that, you know, they're for different purposes. They're different tools for different purposes.
Yeah, and I think another thing I could add to that, which is right in line with what Father Chris just said, is, one of the reasons Gnostics existed as a heresy in the ancient world, and still to this day is fascination people have with Gnosticism. And don't get me wrong, Gnosticism offers a great body of interesting literature, a wonderful view of philosophy, and I find very, very useful even to this day, because it did influence a lot of what became Orthodox Christianity. So, you know, there's nothing inherently wrong with the philosophical aspects of Gnosticism. Where it gets into trouble, essentially, is on a few points that sort of violate more of the traditional teaching. And one of those is Gnostics essentially saw that the God of the Old Testament could not have been the real God that was the Father of Jesus Christ, because he was so contrary to what Jesus describes with the Father. So with Jesus, we have this loving Father, wants to be in relationship with us, wants to save us, wants to care for us, takes care of our needs, is always there, is patient, is understanding, is kind. And Jesus is the sort of the emulation of this, right? A living physical example of this. But then you go to the Old Testament, and he's like starting wars, and he wants you to kill people, and he wipes out the planet with a flood, and he's vengeful, right? He's a vengeful God in the Old Testament. So the Gnostics said, this can't be the same God. This has to be a different God. So they came up with an entirely different view of the creation story, and basically said that the serpent that was in the Garden of Eden is actually Sophia. It was the consort to the Christ, here to kind of be like, look, this guy is the demiurge. He's pretending. He doesn't even know he's not the real God. I represent the real God, and I'm here to help you get out of this. So here, eat this fruit. It will make you aware of good and evil so that you'll be able to recognize it. They completely turned the Garden of Eden story on its head, which is fascinating. It's a fascinating thing. And philosophically, it holds a lot of value. Theologically, it kind of creates problems, though, if you are a literalist particularly. So the important thing to keep in mind here is, I always said, when people would throw at me, well, how do you then? If you're not going to take the Gnostic answer, how do you explain why the God of the Old Testament is so different than the God in the New Testament? And I think it's very simple. The Jewish people did not have the full revelation of Christ yet. They did not have a fully developed understanding of God yet. So when they would see things happen, they interpreted them through the lens of what they understood to be going on. And the Old Testament isn't meant to be irrefutably correct in its literal nature. It's there to show the progression. So it means that the information in the Old Testament, as it is described by the various actors you see within the story, means that there could be erroneous information because it's telling the perspective of how they understood it at that time before God had revealed himself in Christ. So when you read as a Christian the Old Testament, you have to read it.
I mean, if they could have figured it out without the incarnation, why would the incarnation have taken place?
Right, exactly. It wouldn't have needed to happen. So
God's plan from all eternity was to come and live amongst us. It wasn't plan B because humans ate the fruit.
Correct. So
in the garden.
Exactly.
This was always going to be, always going to be the way.
Yeah. In fact, that is the whole point of Oh Happy Fault, that it was allowed to happen because he knew it was going to happen, but it was allowed to continue so that it would bring us to this more intimate relationship that we could have never had the fall never occurred. Mm-hmm. So, it's almost a kind of Gnosticism in a way. It really is. I mean, it's very interesting. We can talk about, maybe we need a show on just that, because not all Gnosticism is the heretical aspect of it. There is a really good philosophical side of it that's very useful even to the Christian today. But my point that I want to make here is that the God might have looked wrathful to their understanding at that time without knowing that, wait a second, this is a loving Father. But they had no one to tell them that. They didn't have Jesus. Mm-hmm. So they would have interpreted everything that went wrong, and people are egocentric, so they never stop to think that maybe they were doing something wrong. Oh no, it's God doing it.
God's mad.
Yeah, God's angry. God's doing it. And so,
by the way,
the Bible records
we're in a similar position. We're in a similar position now because if we put ourselves back in, as Brandon's question encourages us to do, to put ourselves back in that time.
Right. Yeah.
That was a time when God's people were living without the knowledge of the incarnation that was to come.
That's right.
And we're living, we've had the incarnation and the resurrection, but we've not had the parousia. We've not had the second coming.
It's true.
We've not had the new heaven, the new earth. So we're actually we're in a different place, but in a sense, it's the same position of post parousia, post our Lord coming again. People will look back and go, oh, how did they think that?
I know they will. I mean, it's true. And that's what I try to say. It's like I personally feel that revelation is a progressive thing. I don't think it ever stopped. So, like the first question today from the ether about, how do you describe heaven? If it's wherever the dead go, well, they got to stop there. First of all, it's not where the dead go. It's where the living wake up to. It's where the living are. That's the only place the living are. It's not where the dead go.
It's not an end point.
It's not an end point. Right.
You're still living. There's still, it's not as though, let's get through this life and then, whoa, we can just chill out in heaven.
No, that's where it begins.
No, there'll be work to do. Yeah.
No, it's true. and we can't conceive of that because that hasn't been revealed yet. So it's easy.
I can't tell you what it is, other than that it will involve worshipping the lamb. Other than that, I can't tell you.
Right, right. And from our perspective, it looks like, oh, it's where you go when you die and you just hang out, I guess, on some beach, you know. I don't know what people think about, they call it paradise, but they don't really understand what it means. So, and it's because we haven't received the fullness of that revelation. The same thing was for the ancient Israelites, and the Old Testament is just full of this kind of data. So it's the Word of God in as much as it shares the story of salvation, but it doesn't mean it's literally the Word of God. Therefore, everything in there is infallibly, accurately true to history, to everything. That's not. If you're reading the Old Testament that way, you're going to get it wrong. You're going to get the whole Judeo-Christian,
all the New Testament,
all of it. Yeah, that's right. So I think that's the important way to answer this question, Brandon.
Okay. Yeah. That'll take me a little bit to track through all the little rabbit holes we went down.
Yeah, well, you got the recording here. You can always go back and reference it, right?
Oh, he's going to.
Yeah. He will, too.
He's going to.
You know, if you want, I don't know what you can do or what you want to do, but Brandon, you are welcome to join the Zoom at any time if you want to come into the discussion. You don't have to sit there on the phone, but you're welcome to stay there on the phone, too, if you want.
I think he's driving, isn't he?
Oh, is he driving?
Driving?
Are you still driving?
Oh, no. I'm
okay,
home.
good.
Okay, so you're welcome, your choice. But if you want to stay on the phone, that's fine. If you want to join the Zoom, that's fine. If you want to hang up, that's fine. But I'll leave you there. You can decide what you want to do. But anyway, there is a follow-up to the last discussion in the chat that I wanted to address about Christmas. I said, I can't stand when we call it Jesus's birthday, because that's just not what it is. It's not a good way to look at it. And December 25th was almost certainly not the historical date of when this nativity occurred. Mason Locklear in the chat said, I think Christmas came from pagans being subjected to Rome, if I'm not mistaken, but not Christian in origin. I want to correct that, because that is a common belief. And yes, of course, there's the Yule association and everything else. Okay, so yeah, Yule was, of course, a pagan, part of the pagan calendar. Let's face it, who were the Christians? They were all converted pagans by this point. I mean, statistically,
try explaining that to my pagan friends.
I know. Well, statistically, most Christians were not of Jewish descent. Most Jews did not convert. It was the Greeks that converted, and then the Romans. So the fact of the matter is, most of them were coming from, and you don't just throw away your these holidays that are not just sacred holidays, but also just integrated into your culture.
It was tradition for a lot of them. They're not going to give that up.
It was. So in that sense, you could say, okay, there's a pagan influence, but it was not a pagan date. The date of December 25th was chosen because in the early church, Christmas was not really considered to be terribly important. You know what was important? The conception of Jesus, the Annunciation, as it's referred to, when Mary is greeted by the angel Gabriel, and he asks her if she's willing to receive Jesus in her womb, and she says yes to this. And this happened. This was much more important to the early Christians. In fact, this was one of the earliest feast days in the church as the liturgical calendar was starting to develop, and that date was always chosen to be March 25th. So when Christmas started to become a more important date, something like, well, maybe we should be celebrating that one too. They were like, well, what date do we choose? It wasn't because, let's go with Yule because it's like, it's the dark time of the year. And then, no. It was because they just said, how long does it take to have a baby? Well, 9 months. 9 months from March 25th is December 25th. And that's literally how that date got chosen. So it really is a Christian origin date. And then if you look at it, I hate to break it to all the pagans that love this, but when you look at all of the different pagan celebrations that are associated with December 25th, and they'll say, see, the Christians appropriated it from the pagans, they all came long after, sometimes over 100 years after the Annunciation was already being celebrated on March 25th, which means that the date of December 25th is older for Christmas than most of these pagan celebrations, okay? And Yule was not on December 25th.
The same is true of Easter.
Yes, very true. Yes, you're right about that. Yeah, absolutely. So the fact is, you know, I want to make that clear because I know that's a big misconception, and we could go into a lot more detail about it. Yeah, it's a Christian day.
Every Easter, the same old lies, misconceptions come out.
I know.
Oh, it's from a pagan festival. No.
The bunny doesn't help. The bunny doesn't help, Father.
Doesn't even have it doesn't have the same etymology. It just sounds similar. You know, but this Germanic root word sounds similar. It's like, yeah. Do you know what? We might use the word Easter in English, but actually the word, you know, Pascha is what's used throughout the rest of the world.
Yeah.
And even we use the word the Passion for the Christ. So this is just wordplay nonsense, and unfortunately, I mean, the reason I'm attacking it is because, you know, ordinary people get sucked in by this nonsense.
They do, and because it
they
becomes
fall out,
memes.
so
It gets promoted and proliferated with memes and TikTok culture and all this stuff. And look, I know we got viewers on TikTok right now. I'm not criticizing you for being on TikTok. Thank you for joining us tonight. But I mean, you can't deny the fact that these little short 2-3 second videos aren't really giving you the full picture. So when you see something, you know,
I understand the drive for people to not want to believe in God. I get it. I completely understand the motivation.
Yeah.
Because actually, if it's true, you've got stuff to do.
Yeah.
Like, you know,
a lot of catching up to do.
Yeah, it's easier to be an
all
atheist.
this nonsense, you have no responsibility and nothing you do matters at all. Now, I think that's a fairly bleak life, but it's great for the depressive and the lazy person, you know.
And the selfish.
Actually, if there is a God, then you've got some obligations, and who wants to take that on if you're lazy or depressed or, you know, dejected?
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, so do we have any questions from the chat that we haven't got to yet?
We've got several. If you don't mind me getting this one kind of out of the way, it's also for Mason. He's got quite a few questions in here.
Oh, good.
This has to do with appearing on Ghost Adventures.
Okay.
They had a episode where they used I think he means stone tape theory at the St. Louis, Missouri Exorcist House. He'd like to know more about the negative energy that are embedded into inanimate objects. Pardon me.
All right. Well, there is a theory in paranormal research, parapsychology, that states that inanimate objects absorb energy, and stone and wood in maybe particular, might absorb even more energy, according to different theories. There is, I guess you could say, and maybe the best way to try to explain this is from a metaphysical vantage point, because there's not really a theological basis for this as much. I mean, you know, there is some clever sayings that you could draw from theology that might help to shed light on it, but you're not going to get really, I think, the kind of answer that they want in this quorant wants without metaphysics. So metaphysically, the idea is that, you know, in the ancient world, before all of these formal religions, okay, there was shamanism, which evolved into the more organized types of religion that we practice today. But prior to shamanism evolved out of a type of pantheism. Okay, in fact, you could say almost that shamanism and pantheism are sort of like almost two sides of the same coin at certain levels, and pantheism takes on an idea that that the entire universe is alive, and that every object contains a spirit, and this is, from a metaphysical, esoteric vantage point, actually true. It is true. Inanimate objects do contain spirit, and those spirits can interact with other spirits. Okay, so obviously nobody really doubts, unless you're an atheist, you don't really doubt that you have a spirit, that people have a spirit, right, or spiritual nature. And if a person were to, let's say, be in a house made of stone or wood, that a significant trauma occurs there, then that energy could very well get absorbed into the spiritual nature of those objects or that inanimate material. And this is sort of how it works. It's more of an enmeshment. It's not so much that energy gets absorbed or remembered as much as it is that it interacts with the already existent spiritual nature of whatever is there. And if that spiritual nature of whatever is there happens to be a particularly strong categorization of this of energy, then it could reanimate the trauma that it absorbs. Or interacts with or mingles with, and then it can create these things that we would call hauntings or any number of paranormal disturbances is really what it is. I mean, I don't know if that's helpful to see it from that esoteric vantage point. I don't think it changes anything in terms of studying it, or how it happens. If you're asking if it's true, yeah, it's true from a certain point of view. I wouldn't say it's necessarily important, though. It just suffice it to say that that environments are alive. They are alive at least spiritually. And if trauma happens there, well, it reacts to that trauma. It will reflect that trauma, and if it's particularly a strong energetic system, then it can create a reaction in that environment that could be very dangerous for the living to interact with, which is how you sometimes get these things that are like the demonic infestations, as they would refer to them. And that's, that's just metaphysics, not getting into theology or anything. And I've realized I've had to do better, I think, because this show's about so much, right? This wall back here. Look, we got Jesus, we've got Baphomet, we've got the Wiccan creed over here. We got runes. This is
the witch's alphabet.
We do. So we cover a lot of topics, and this wall is supposed to represent all the different things that we talk about. There's Buddhism over here. We get some Buddhas. And the reality is that I think we have to be better about when we answer a question. Well, from what vantage point are we answering? And so this is really not a church question. It's not one that theology really is equipped for, but it's one that metaphysics has a response to. And as far as a paranormal researcher, maybe it is helpful to understand how it happens, although it doesn't really change what you need to do in terms of, well, it depends on what your motivations are. If you're there just to have fun, if you're just there to entertain yourself with ghosts, well, then I don't think it really matters how it happens, because you're just there to have a good time. But if you're actually taking the work seriously and you want to resolve it for a person, well, then at that point, then, it really does help to understand how energy gets trapped and how energy gets released. And so what you do, and this is what an exorcist, a really competent exorcist would do, would learn how to break those connections, to dissipate them, let them, just dissipate. And that's what they do. They dissipate. They don't go anywhere. Most exorcism is just dissipation work. It's not casting out is such a dramatic way of describing it. You're not casting anything out. You're dissipating. You're breaking connections and dissipating is what it is. It's really almost like a dissolution process. You're dissolving. And so demonic energy, evil energy, whatever you want to call it, negative energy. A good exorcist knows how to dissolve that energy. So it just gets reabsorbed into the cosmos and can no longer form harm. Because see, look, you get one of the things that you'll hear sometimes New Agers say, oh, I can prove that there's life after death. Physics proves that there's life after death. Well, how? How does physics prove it? Well, they'll say this. They'll say, well, energy can't be created or destroyed, right? So that must mean that since we're made of energy, then that means we'll always exist. We can't be destroyed. No, that's not what it means at all, because you're not just one energy system. You're a cohesive energy system, and that cohesion doesn't have to exist forever. Yeah, the core energy, the base energy will always be here. I mean, to put it another way, you're made up of atoms, aren't you? When you die, those atoms just don't disappear. The atoms just go back into the earth as you decompose, and the atoms are still there, but those atoms are not you anymore, because the cohesion of those atoms that made you are no longer cohesive. And the same thing goes with negative energy patterns. You break them down. You don't cast them out. You break them down so that they lose their cohesion and they fall apart, and then the energy just gets naturally reabsorbed into the recycling system of the cosmos. It's exactly how it works. It's exactly how it works. So hopefully that clears the question up. Anything? I mean, you might have something to say about this because you do this work with me.
Yeah, it's all about changing vibrational patterns and breaking up, patterns that aren't healthy to the people that are having to deal with the situation. I mean, I can't explain it any better than you, but that's basically what it is. Is you're taking something that's out of whack and you're tuning it back to baseline.
Yeah. It is. You're bringing things back to a neutral point.
Right.
Because people pick up attachments. All right. So just like
all the time.
Objects, absorb energy, it's not just stones and wood, okay?
I mean, we pick up attachments. Everybody picks up attachments. It's just how you deal with it and
have you ever had a bad day? Have you ever gone to work and everything goes wrong and you come home in a bad mood? What happened there? You absorbed energy. You created
negative energy.
That is a demonic attachment. It's not demonic in the fallen angel attacking you for possession way. It is demonic in the sense that it's negative energy that got attached to you. It intermingled with your energy and is now making you feel like shit, is what that is. And so how do you get over it? Well, usually that just dissipates with time, right? So you go, maybe you have a drink, you go to bed early, you wake up the next morning, it's a better day. All right. The energy just dissipates on its own. Sometimes, though, with more sentient, more sophisticated energy systems, well, they can be a little bit more difficult to get rid of. You can't just wake up to a new life. It can sometimes draw you even further down. So that's why it's best to never form unnecessary attachment. In fact, I would say there's no such thing as a necessary attachment. You shouldn't be attached to anything. Everything is just a tool for your use to attain salvation. That's it. You're not your money, not your property, not your job, not your status, not your family members, not your friends. No attachments to anything. Okay? Not even your kids. Everyone's there. Everything's there to facilitate the process of salvation. And so with people, it's a little different because now you're helping each other, right? You're there to be there for each other. But you shouldn't attach. It's not about owning. You say, what attachment is? You know why it's so problematic from a moral point of view? It's about ownership. You're taking ownership of something that doesn't belong to you.
Well, it's labeling yourself too. Once you label yourself, you're in trouble.
That's true.
Yeah. That
That is true because once you've reduced yourself to a category, well, then now you've trapped yourself. But at the other side of the coin is nothing you have belongs to you. Your kids are not your property. Your wife's not your property.
I think that's the most prevalent problem is attachment of parents to their children. You're supposed to love your children.
There can be some unhealthy, unhealthy
You know,
attachments.
but I mean, I think it's. I can't think of a time in human history where parents have been more overly attached to their children. Like it's
unhealthy,
and it's why people can't. Economics is why they can't grow up. It's also this over attachment of parents. You have to flipping let go. You have to.
And the idolization,
by the way.
And the idolatry of youth
go comes with a shove.
But Father, also the idolatry of youth. I mean, I think people are so obsessed with being young that they've turned their children into almost like little demigods.
Yeah.
And they want to hold on to that.
You can't let your kids grow up.
No, they're not allowed to grow up.
That means you're getting older.
Yeah, because it means.
Well, I was gonna. You've nailed it there.
It's
Jamie,
a selfish thing.
I was called young at Christmas. Well, I am 45 years old.
You are young.
And so I am at least midlife.
That's midlife. I wouldn't call it young.
For a man, yeah.
If I live till 90, I'll be doing pretty well, and so not that I have any great attachments to that, but but what that was really about, the person saying it is of a generation above me.
Yeah.
So I have to be young, otherwise they're old, right?
That's right. And I think you're right. I think the reason why we've held, and I've created controversy with saying this, but I really think a lot of the problems that we have in society today are the fact that we have created this gold standard of 18 years old is adulthood, like as if everybody falls into that perfect category of 18.
Right.
And that you're a child before that, even to the point that, not that I want to get into Epstein, but I get really irritated when they refer to the victims as, or they refer to Epstein as a pedophile when the victims were all like, 15, 16, 17. Not that that's any better, but my point is, that's a very different problem.
The actual definition of pedophile is different.
It's very different. And the reality is that we want to hold on to this childhood for so long that we're not even allowing our adolescents to grow up. There's no integration for them. They have to go from being an infant all the way to staying an infant for 18 years, and then now go out there and do something with your life. And in America, it's even worse because a lot of conservative families have this attitude that, oh, you're an adult now. You're out of my house. I'm not doing anything for you. And I mean, I think that's absolutely immoral. But the fact of the matter is, you gave them no integration period. And, 1,000 years ago, you got married, you worked at 13.
Yeah.
All right. I mean,
because you only lived at 30.
Well,
in some places, yeah.
That's true. But I mean, honestly, when you look at it outside of war and everything, people in the Middle Ages lived just as long as we did. It was just as likely to live to 70 or 80. It's just the fact is they had a lot more kids. And infant death was much greater than it is today.
Yeah.
So the death rate looked like they died young statistically, but in reality, if you made it past 10, you pretty much lived a normal life like you did today. Yeah, you pretty much lived, unless you had a war or something. But the fact is, you would live a normal life. 70, 80, even 90 years was possible.
Yeah, it'd be better to look at average age of death instead of average age.
That would be it. And if you did, it would look just the same as it is today. But my point is, and I'm not arguing, because I know there'll be these critics out there that will say, see what he said? No, I'm not arguing that we should send our 13-year-old daughters to go get married and get jobs or whatever. I'm not arguing that, because you can't just reverse society. But what I'm trying to say is, since society chose to glorify youth to the point of doing this, idolizing you to the point of doing this, that there are consequences now to that. So now you've got teenagers that are doing teen takeovers because they don't know what the fuck to do with themselves. All right? They don't have a place in society.
We've also protected them out of employment.
Yes, they can't work
because you can't employ them.
Yeah,
because you can't. Insurance says you can't have some 13-year-old doing a part-time job. I got my first job at the age of, I think I was 8. I was sweeping leaves at the local antique shop.
Yeah.
Who would take that risk on now?
I know.
Because it was the corner of a street. If a car had hit me, I'm technically an employee now.
Yeah, right. Yeah.
So we've sort of regulated our way out of.
And it did. It came from labor laws. It came from the fact, and I hate to say it, but a lot of it was Victorian England. It came from the fact that the workhouses, right? And they had these kids that were working themselves to death. They were losing limbs, doing this dangerous stuff, and nobody was taking care of them. And so they started to protect.
Just killing themselves because they got no reason to live.
Yeah.
Got no
because what can an adolescent kid do?
Better.
What can your body's telling you need to start having sex, but you're not allowed to do that. Your body's telling you that you need to grow up, but you're not allowed to do that. You can't drink. You can go to war and kill people at 18, but you can't drink at 18. Can't even rent a car till you're 25. I mean,
well, in fairness, you can drink at 18 in civilized countries.
Yeah, but this is not a civilized country, Father. America likes to pride itself as being like the gold standard for how everyone should live, and it's like, we've got our problems here. I'm not saying it's not a decent country. It's it has the potential to be a great one. I don't think it's achieved that yet. I think it might get there if it can get past all this bullshit.
When I came out to see you, we brought our 19-year-old with us, and of course she'd been drinking for a year in Australia and then went to America and couldn't order.
Oh, it must have been horrible. And see, my feeling is, look, if you're going to make 18 like some kind of ridiculous, like now you're an adult kind of thing, well, then it needs to be an adult for everything, which means you should be drinking at 18 if you want to drink at 18. You're an adult, for God's sake. But as far as like even just adolescence, it's like, I feel like if you're with your parents and your parents are okay with it, why shouldn't you be allowed to have a glass of wine? That's the way it used to be in the 80s. I mean, it's not legal, but you can in Australia. And you should. It's legal in Britain. Well, that's the way it should be. I mean, I think that's the way it should be. All right, we're going to take our next break here because we're now at the top of the next hour. And when we come back, more of your questions. Don't go away.
Presto chango! San Francisco, I was born there. Francisco. San Francisco. Born there. Born there. San Francisco. Presto. Change.
Jalad at Tanagra. Presto Chango.
San Francisco. I was born there. I was born there. Born there. Born there. San Francisco. Presto change.
San Francisco.
San Francisco.
Captain Disco. Dharma and Jalad at Tanagra.
San Francisco. Born there. Born there. San Francisco. Presto. Change.
Captain Disco. Dharma and Jalad at Tanagra. And Jalad at Tanagra.
His arms open.
I was walking down through Redneckville, hunting for some pool supplies. When I found it, the eternal werewolf. Eternal! Got it. Eternal werewolf. He's back. Eternal werewolf on your back. I was walking down through Redneckville, hunting for some pool supplies. When I found it, the eternal werewolf. Eternal! Got it. Eternal werewolf. He's back. Eternal werewolf on your back. I was walking down through Redneckville, hunting for some pool supplies. When I found it, the eternal werewolf. Eternal! Got it. Eternal werewolf. He's back. Eternal werewolf on your back. I was walking down through Redneckville, hunting for some pool supplies. When I found it, the eternal werewolf, eternal werewolf. He's back. Eternal werewolf on your. I was walking down through Redneckville, hunting for some pool supplies. When I found it, the eternal werewolf, eternal werewolf. He's back. Eternal werewolf on your back.
Welcome back, everyone, to the third and final hour of Vestiges After Dark. We hope you are having a wonderful time and learning a lot, and hopefully getting your wheels turning. You know, that's the whole point here. You should leave here feeling great, feeling miserable, feeling a little, disoriented, maybe a little offended. That's the point, okay? If that happened, then we've achieved our goal, because that's how you grow. That's how you learn. You don't grow if you just sit there feeling good all the time. You have to be challenged. Otherwise, what's the point? I'm not doing my job. I should be fired if I'm not doing that. So yeah, be offended. It's a good thing. I'll be back in just a moment for more offense. I got a notice during the break that TikTok had flagged the live for discussing themes that could be sensitive to some viewers. So there's content
When
restrictions.
you said that word, I thought.
Is your response
Actually,
no
no,
shit?
you know what it was? It wasn't pedophilia. It's suicide. It's suicide's the word. You can talk about pedophiles till you're blue in the face. They're okay with that on TikTok, but you can't talk about suicide.
I think
That's
I
too
got
much.
hit with that on YouTube.
It is. Yeah, it's suicide. I don't really give a shit. Look, I'm not going to use unalived and all this other bullshit that people do to keep their stream
watering
going.
it down. It is
this
what it
is
is.
why we're not monetized, because I don't want to be monetized in reality, because I don't want to be told what I can and cannot say. No, that's not what we're going to do here. We're going to talk truth.
No, euphemisms are destroying humanity.
Absolutely.
So
I'm not going to build it.
good
That's
for you.
bullshit. That's woke bullshit is what that is. Okay. So looking at, there was one comment here from Paula that I wanted to respond to. She had a good point. She says, I don't believe their brains, we were talking about 18-year-olds drinking before. I don't believe their brains are formed well enough to make good decisions when it comes to drinking at 18, but I also don't think they should be allowed into the military until 21 either.
Having been in the military before I was 21,
I think it's categorical.
We could drink on post.
Yeah.
I know when I was stationed in Korea, we could drink at 18.
Yeah. Look, I want to respond to that, because I was drinking at 13.
It's personal responsibility.
I was drinking at 13. Now, whether or not that was the right thing to do,
I was younger.
Were you? Yeah, were you?
Yeah.
You stigmatize it, and it's not a big deal.
Were you sneaking it, or were you being given it?
Being given it.
Okay, that's what it was for me
by
too.
my parents.
It wasn't my parents, but I mean, it was definitely family. And honestly, in reality, okay, did it turn me into an alcoholic? No, it didn't. Did I get drunk? I think the first time I got drunk was probably 16, and I didn't like it, so it didn't happen very often. But the fact is, I think, to Paula's point, and she does make a good point. Mm-hmm. Look, we have conditioned through generations of influence a phenomenon where, and I'm going to give you a theory here. Look, it's a metaphysical theory. I'm not claiming to be a scientist on this, although I think if you were to do research on it, if there were people motivated to do research on that, I think they'd find that what I'm about to say is true. But that's besides the point. I feel the hormones you get at puberty are to mature you. I think when you stunt those by doing all these restrictions on adult life, I think what happens is those hormones go wrong, leading to all of the problems we have with adolescence. Now, there's going to be intellect that's a part. Now, if you're really a smart kid, you might be able to work around those hormonal problems that are caused by our society. If you're not so smart, you're going to probably fall victim, maybe join a gang and try to, prove your worth in some other criminal way because you're not being given a legitimate way to do it. I think if we had allowed puberty to mature us socially, I don't think you'd see that brains are not developing fully until 22, 23. Now they're saying 25. It used to be 22 when I was in undergrad school, psychology. Now they're saying it's 25. I think we're pushing off the age of maturity because we're not allowing our biology to do its job, and we're creating social restrictions, which are leading all sorts of other kins of problems to development.
All of these restrictions, they're very recent as well. Like, this is just a huge social experiment. You know, we get the imposition of licensing laws in England.
Yes.
I know law in England and Wales because I was a policeman there in 1967, right? So that's not that long ago. I know to Gen Z that feels like it was 3,000 years ago, but it really wasn't.
Right.
And so you go back to the turn of the last century there's all sorts of issues. We create issues for ourselves with these restrictions. And so, for example, ADHD is now off the charts. Well, if we don't get down too far down that wormhole,
Yep.
I'm only saying this for the purpose of saying we know that really ADHD is not a disorder. It's just that our world is kind of weird. Like, human beings weren't generated to sit in a chair and look at a screen. So now we have issues. Well, if you go back in time, you could buy amphetamines from your local chemist.
Yeah.
They weren't restricted. You could just buy them. So it wasn't some grubby drug dealer down the road. Or what we've got now in Australia in particular, a very expensive drug dealer, namely a psychiatrist, who's the only one who's allowed to prescribe amphetamines for ADHD.
Yeah.
So you have people who are basically normal people who have to spend $1,500 in order to get something they used to be able to buy down the shop. And so, look, restrictions come in for reasons. I'm not an anarchist.
Oh yeah, no.
Everything can be abused.
Yeah.
But the ledger is far too safe now. Like, safety is destroying our freedom.
I think if you look at all of the Mason's talk about mental illness, autism, schizophrenia, bipolar disorder, all these mental illnesses, I really do think that if anybody took it seriously, what I said, that if you look into it, if you really look into it, they're all developmental disorders because the brain is not allowed to mature when it gets its burst of hormones to do so, and that's usually around puberty, 12 or 13, because we restrict that. This is what ends up happening. I know I'm going to go to my grave believing that because I've seen the evidence of
parents
it.
that won't allow you to
Well, that's
to explore and learn on your own.
Correct.
And have trial and error.
But to Paula's point, we can't just be like, let's go back, because now it's going to be another generation upon generation process to fix it.
Yeah, it's too late.
Because it's been so damaged. So she is right to a degree that most, not all, because you clearly were okay at 18 to join the military.
Oh yeah.
I'm sure I could have been if I had pursued it further. I actually thought about the Navy for a while. So she's not wrong in the sense that, yeah, brains are not developing now till 22 to 25.
Yeah.
But that shouldn't be what's happening. That should never have been a thing. It should have been 13, 12, 14. Around that time is when we should be seeing full maturity of the brain. And I don't think we are. Well, there's no psychology 1,000 years ago, so we would never be able to actually, unless we reverse course. And no one's going to do that because they're too content with the way things are today. Society is what it is now. So now we have to deal with it. So, there are healthy ways to try to work around this, but you're never going to be able to fix the damage we've done to the human brain as the result of it. So Paul is not wrong. You can't go back.
And it's a spiritual battle too, because this is a symptom of materialism.
Yes.
We think we won the Cold War. In a military sense, we won the Cold War. In an economic sense, we won the Cold War. Unlike when the Second World War ended, there was a denazification project that went on.
Yeah.
When the Cold War ended, there wasn't a demarxification project. And so we've lost, Marxism is now basically mainstream in Western culture because it's materialist. And existentialist, and therefore, of course, everything gets coddled and maturity gets delayed. We try to, because if we delay our childhood, maybe we'll live longer. It's this sort of. Most people don't think about it in these terms. Even policymakers, I know, because I've worked with them. But this is a symptom of a lack of faith. It was more important for people who believe in God. It's more important to become fully alive and fully functional as a child of God doing something in this world. And so you look at newsreel footage from the turn of the last century in the East End of London, where people were in absolute poverty, and you've got some 12-year-old that's looking after his two younger siblings because his parents had died. And you think, now, of course, that's not a situation we would all think is great. Let's go back to those days.
Right.
I'm not making that point. I'm saying that they were able and capable, and the world was orientated in a different way that meant that was possible. And now, the materialism that we live in makes it just incredibly unusual for people to grow up that quick.
It's true. Yeah. So now you're between a rock and a hard place, and you're kind of stuck having to go along with it. I mean, but you can improve certain things. I mean, April, you work in psychology. I'm sure you're no stranger to the things that we're talking about here. You might not fully agree with the theories that have been presented, but or maybe you do. But I mean, certainly immaturity is a big problem with our youth today. And I think it stems from the fact that they're not given an opportunity to actually grow up, because people selfishly want to extend their own life by avoiding the next stage, because the empty nest syndrome makes you feel like you're ancient, I guess. I don't know what it is, but they want to hold on to it, and I don't think it's good for the kids, and I think we're seeing the result in the fact that we have teen takeovers and gang problems and all sorts of issues all around the world where things are not being properly dealt with. So what are your thoughts on, from a psychological vantage point, from a counselor's point of view, what are your thoughts on some of this?
I think that there's a lot of issues that I see. And one of the big ones that I would say is probably a lot of parenting now is you put them in front of a screen. And I think that there's so many people that I have seen that do not even know how to play with their kids. They don't understand. You sit down on the floor with them and you show them how to put a puzzle together. I have kids who come into my office that cannot even put a 10-piece puzzle together. And there's things like that I think that
shocking.
Parents are becoming more hands off. They put them in front of a screen, and I think that
and they don't let them grow up, and they don't let them grow up.
And the thing like the drinking you guys were talking about, one of the things that we deal with here in Tennessee is everybody has guns, and there's a lot of kids shootings.
Mm-hmm.
Well, the thing of it is, it's because parents will say, "Don't touch that." Well, what's a kid going to do?
Makes
I'm
them
going
want
to touch that.
Yeah, makes them want to
You
touch it.
should start teaching them young, and it's
Yeah,
not.
you say, come on. The way I was raised is my parents said to me, you can shoot that gun anytime you want to as long as I'm here with you.
Yeah.
And I never try to sneak in and get it. And I think it's a lot more, kids are not allowed to go outside and play because the world's somewhat dangerous. But also, I think that a lot of parents just, were busy or whatever. I think there's a lot of stuff that goes into it.
Well said.
Yeah,
okay.
The parents won't play with them, and they won't let them go out and play with anyone else.
No,
Right.
No. So
Sit in the corner on the phone.
It's a recipe for absolute
Play
societal disaster, and we're going to see it with the next generations for sure. I can guarantee you that. I can guarantee. All right, joining us from the 330 area code, which I believe is Ohio. Hello, you're on the air with Vestiges After Dark.
Hi, everybody. Changing gears here a little bit.
Sure.
I've been checking into different things because, I'm curious and I like theology and I like to see and hear all aspects. So, what do you think about where they say Ethiopia is the original place and they have the original papers in the Bible and like there's a seventh heaven that Jesus came down from the very top down to the one, and then that's how he became the infant and all of that.
Well, Ethiopia is the Ethiopian Orthodox Church is a very interesting church. I mean, there's no doubt that it has a unique history that is perhaps more unique than any other iteration of Christianity on the planet right now that's still practiced.
They claim to have the Ark.
They do claim to have the Ark, although, there's some explanations for that. We can get into that if you want. They always say they're going to show it and they never do. And then there was one person that claimed to finally have seen it, and it turned out to be, all Ethiopian Orthodox churches have a model of the Ark.
Right.
And it's something that tradition does. But overall, outside of that, as you have shared with us right now, caller, there is unique aspects to Christianity in terms of how Ethiopian Christianity sort of has a very different history. Some can even say that it's traced back to Judaism, and there are some of the ancient Israelites that made their way down there. And, I think it's like everything else in all the legends that exist within the history of the church. They're all plausible. They're all possible. But it's like anything else. How do you prove it? How do you ever really get down to where there's absolute facts here? The Ethiopian Orthodox has a larger canon in Scripture, and their tradition does warrant that, though other Orthodox churches do too. Father, what do you think? Do you think that there's a justification to some of these extraordinary claims that are made about Ethiopia in terms of Christianity?
Look, I think yes, but the important thing to note about the Ethiopian church is that, and it's part of the Coptic church, right? But the Christians in Ethiopia have been, in a sense, isolated. So whereas you get Christianity, well, we can't even call it Christianity. This movement within Judaism goes into the Roman world, into the Greek world, Greco-Roman world, and eventually gets called Christianity. And along the way, it interacts with the political structures, and eventually we get Constantine adopting the religion, and then we have a sort of historical revelation of that most of us can access, or we're the products of, shall we say, certainly if we're in Western countries. Ethiopia, meanwhile, has basically just got on with it from the start. Is it St. Mark goes to Ethiopia? I think it's St. Mark.
I'm not sure on that one.
I think it's St. Mark.
Probably right.
I think it's St. Mark goes to Ethiopia, and I'm of the tradition that says St. Mark was Marcus, who the Gospel of Mark was written by, and he was an associate of St. Peter. So we get this very direct connection from Jesus, St. Peter, Mark to Ethiopia, and then in a sense Ethiopia is sort of, it was never colonized, right? And so bits of Abyssinia were by the Italians, but it was never really colonized. And so that's why the Ethiopian church is so distinctive. So let me put it this way. I don't think they're lying. I think that they've got their revelation of how they've received Christianity, that it's authentic, that they are genuine Christians, and that they trace their origins all the way back to the New Testament era. But I think that they are very different from the rest of the Christian world because they've been in isolation. It's also plausible that they do have the Ark of the Covenant. The Ark of the Covenant, either it was melted down and will never be found again, or it's intact and someone's got it.
I mean, that's of course possible. It's like any claim made by, like we were talking about earlier. Did the ancient Israelites believe that there were many gods and they only really thought one was important? That's a plausible history. It's not the one the church adopts, but it doesn't mean the church got that history right. The infallibility of church doctrine is about salvation. It's not necessarily about history, So I think you have to take everything with an open mind, which is why this church does these kinds of philosophical explorations, because we don't. Yeah, people ask me what do you mean by you're a non-dogmatic church? Because I always explain, the Nicolean Catholic Church is a non-dogmatic Catholicism. The Church of Rome is a dogmatic Catholicism. What do I mean by that, though? What I mean is we see the structure of Christianity and we maintain that structure at its core level. So obviously the Nicene Creed, sacramental theology, these are not avoidable. These are things that have to maintain cohesion and integrity. You can't play with them. You can't modify them. But that doesn't mean, though, that every single exploration into every single thing is precisely the correct one. Like Thomas Aquinas argued for transubstantiation of the Holy Eucharist. And is that a good model for explaining it? Sure. Though what's the point of it? Well, the point of it is to make sure that people understood that the true presence of Christ is in the Eucharist. That's why he wanted to have a better description. But Orthodoxy would reject Thomas Aquinas on this and say, well, we don't know how it happened. So how can you say that it's this? We just know that the presence of Christ is in the Eucharist. I tend to like the Orthodox way better because I kind of say, let's stop trying to define mysteries and make rules and create even more complications for people to be in doubt. Let's open it up to discussion, as long as we hold true to the things that make us what we are, not play with those. So it's like, obviously we're not going to pretend that Jesus isn't God. That would be problematic. That's not dogma, though. I see that as good doctrine. It's holding it together. Dogma, and I mean, Father Chris and I, the church defines dogma differently than I do. I call it dogma in the terms of dogmatism, in the sense of enforcing things, rules, complications, things that don't necessarily have framework in any kind of validity. And it leads people into these places where they feel like, well, how do we even know anything's true when can't prove any of it anyway. But what we can prove is that the Council of Nicaea gave us what became the foundation to Christianity, and there's nothing that needs to be changed. It's perfect as it is, but it doesn't mean that all the ways in which it manifests are going to be absolutely correct if this church says it or that church says it. So just like Rome makes its own claims, Ethiopia makes its own claims.
The word dogma is it's like all words. I understand in the American context the word dogma, like it's the film Dogma, right? Alanis Morissette as God. I understand it's associated with
it's a negative word there.
It's a negative word, a version of. Because look, personally, I'm not saying that the church hasn't abused its position over the age of people within the church, the church militant, the church on earth. Of course, people have abused their position in the church. Of course, where the church has had too much social and cultural power, that's corrupted it. And I think when especially Americans or Irish people, when they're rejecting dogma, what they mean is we don't want to feel judged, condemned, and controlled by clerics. I think that's what they're talking about. But of course, the word dogma in the context of theology has a very different meaning to that. It interacts. The dogma simply means that which must be believed in order to be saved. So we would say, for example, the Nicene Creed is a dogma.
A dogma, sure, yeah.
That is the minimum dogma, the minimal dogmatic belief that a person must have in order to call themselves a Christian. Now, the Catholic Church essentially divides things into three. One is dogma, the other is doctrine, which is good teaching, and the other is tradition, custom. And these three things interact, and often people take as dogma things that are in fact not dogma, that are doctrine. For example, transubstantiation
is doctrine. Yeah, it's doctrine.
It's doctrine. It's not a dogma, and it could not be a dogma because even Thomas himself acknowledges this is not a comprehensive explanation.
This gives us one, something to work with.
It's an illustration.
Yeah.
So there are actually very few dogmas in the Catholic Church, I would say. There are some that I think are mistakes. There are, I can live with them. I don't think we need. I don't think we need to believe in the assumption of the Blessed Virgin Mary in order to be saved. I do think it's true. I do think it's a true doctrine. To make it a dogma, I think is unnecessary. But who am I? I'll submit to that authority.
Well,
but,
the Orthodox Church would be okay with that one. So
I know they would. Yeah. Even though they really do believe it, but they would say
we don't need the definition. We don't need the specifics. And I think that has led to a lot of schism. Honestly, to be honest,
some mysteries are meant to stay mysteries.
Yeah, it is
trying to figure everything out.
So I think for the caller, in terms of Ethiopian Orthodoxy, I'd say it's a mystery. I think there's possibility there. Whether or not it's more true than any other version of Christianity,
the fundamentals of what they believe are exactly the same as almost every Christian.
I mean, Coptic has some differences, but it's overall it's just another tradition, and if it speaks to you, then that's a wonderful thing. But thank you for that wonderful question, caller. I appreciate it.
Good question.
Oh, well, thank you for the explanations. I mean, that's great. Thank you.
You're most welcome. Thank you again.
Bye-bye.
Call in anytime. All right, let's get to some of these questions because I'm seeing a lot coming in, and we only have about 20 minutes left, so let's try to get through them more quickly. What's our next one, April?
Here's a question that hasn't been asked very often. What do you think of the popularity of people reading the Book of Enoch and the lost books of the Bible?
I mean,
again,
Diana.
Like
I think it's
I
think it's great to read the extra canonical sources.
Dead Sea Scrolls.
It gives you a full context of the ancient world. They're not dogmas,
No.
but they're not authoritative in that sense. But they can speak to you philosophically.
There's wisdom in those writings.
There is. It's absolutely just
but
like
you
Buddha.
have to use your discernment.
You could read the Dhammapada, which is a Buddhist text. There's great wisdom there, very applicable to any Christian's life. It's not an authoritative text. You're not going to read it at Mass, but it still has tremendous philosophical value. I see Enoch and all this as philosophically valuable. Now, that being said, while it holds a certain historical validation, I would also say that you have to also keep in mind that the other side of the coin is when you start taking literal, when you start going on a literal bent with it, and saying, well, Enoch said this, so this must be like the aliens that came, and because they're talking about the Watchers, and and so this is actually an extraterrestrial, ancient extraterrestrial. Now you're taking it too far.
And the Nephilim.
Yeah, keep it in context, okay? Keep it in context and understand that it's talking about a historical picture. It's giving you a larger historical picture. It's not necessarily.
Don't read your own garbage into the text.
Yes,
that's
beautiful. That answers it right there. That answers it right there. Don't read your own garbage into the text. I wouldn't have used the word bullshit, but garbage works. All right. So what's our next one? What's our next one?
Another question comes from Colleen. It said, "Did you choose to become an exorcist, or were you asked to do it?"
Well,
no one chooses.
Yeah, you don't choose it. I mean, and you'd be out of your mind if you did. I mean, really, if you want to be an exorcist, you got to stop and really stop everything you're doing and put everything down and rethink your life choices, because there's something wrong here. You really don't want to do
even
this.
though I'm not and you're not, I think most exorcists really ought to be monks. I think that.
Do agree with that. I do agree with that. Although I think anybody can be given the special graces. I think it's easier.
I agree.
Yeah.
Agree.
And I think we've been given the special graces, but I mean, that's out of necessity, not out of ideal. You know, it's not ideal. And I would gladly yield this to a monk if we had one. The fact is, look, I didn't choose it. It was sort of chosen by me, for me, by the people we were serving. So we had people coming in from all over the local area and looking for help with spiritual problems. They weren't sure what it was, but they thought it seemed demonic. And they went to their pastors. Sometimes they were Catholic. Sometimes they were Protestant. They weren't getting help from either source. Sometimes they were Protestants and they would ask the Catholics and they would not get help. Sometimes they were Catholics and they didn't get help, so they went to Protestant churches. They couldn't get help. So then they found me as this independent Catholic. They said, well, you know, maybe he can help, and he's a bishop, so let's talk to him. And so they came to me, and see, I look at it again because of the non-dogmatic structure of this church. I don't follow any specific pattern of rules. I just do the basics of what Jesus did. Okay, so if somebody came to Jesus and needed help, Jesus helped them, and that's what I do. So people came to me, they looked for pastoral care. I gave them pastoral care. Okay, and then as that happened, the first case that came this way turned out to be a legitimate demonic thing. And I am of the opinion, and my mentor that taught me everything I know about priesthood, who was a Roman Catholic priest, by the way, a pastor emeritus of a big parish, he's long since dead now. But he taught me everything, mentored me all through seminary when I was still a Roman Catholic, seminarian. He believed that, even though, and this is the irony, he didn't believe in the devil in the actual physical sense of a sentient evil. He believed in the devil in the Yetzirah sense, which I guess is where I get some of my opinion here of that from. But he said it didn't really matter either way. You still have to treat it in the same way no matter what, and exorcism works. And he felt that every pastor needs to be prepared for it. He was against this idea that you keep this special sect around, almost like the Knights Templar, where they get sent in when there's a real problem. He felt it's a pastoral duty. And this is because the Orthodox, this is how they treat it. There's no special exorcists in Orthodoxy. Every priest is equipped with it, and they do these mass exorcisms. Yeah, and they should be. We should all know how to deal with the devil, okay? Regardless of how you define it.
And the truth is, in the Western Church, all priests are exorcists by virtue of ordination.
Yes, of course.
Yet, there's this arbitrary restriction.
But they're not allowed to exercise it unless they get permission.
Half of them don't believe it.
I know, that's the problem.
Anyway, I shouldn't have said that.
Until
No,
they
but
get their
it's true.
butt
It is
kicked,
true,
and then they
though.
call
It
us.
is true. And see, when I talk about Yetzirah, that doesn't mean I don't believe it. It means I really believe it, and I'm giving you a better way of looking at it, because there is sentient evil, but it's just not exactly the way it's been described. It's not a wild
Hollywood
paranormal.
film.
Yeah, it's not a Hollywood film. It's much more psychological, but it has a spiritual component. Now, so I helped them. And then what ended up happening was, I guess word got out, and we got another family and another case, and they started coming. And so I just was doing my pastoral duty, and that's how it developed into my now taking this role on as an exorcist. So it wasn't something that I sought, and it wasn't something that was that really was like, it wasn't like my bishop came to me and said, okay, we're going to make you the exorcist here. And as far as my affiliation with the Order of Exorcists in the old Catholic Church, it was just, I didn't want to reinvent the wheel. I was like, okay, well, clearly there's a need for this. People aren't getting help the other way, so let's help them. So I was like, let's see if there's another church in the independent sacramental movement that's already doing this kind of work and has a framework. Sure enough, I found Archbishop Ron File, made contact. I said, I think I can help you with this, because I've been trained in dealing with this kind of thing, and I think I can be useful to your ministry. And so the Holy Nicolean Catholic Church affiliated, and we created a communion with the old Catholic Church this way. So this is how it happened, but that's the way it should happen. It should happen organically. It shouldn't be something you seek. You don't go and say, I'm going to be an exorcist when I grow up. I mean, that's ridiculous. This is a vocation. You discern it, and God, puts you into it if he needs you there. You don't need to go looking for it. It will find you if it's really meant for you. And it probably is not meant for you.
I never thought of, I mean, it's not, I didn't even go into my vocation to the priesthood thinking, oh, right, I'm going to be an exorcist. I mean, It's just that it so happened that I ended up in a part of the world, and God brought people to me who needed help, and there was basically no one else.
Yeah.
Same here, same story.
All about necessity.
And then, and then fortunately we live in a world where you can contact people by other means. And so I did contact older priests who I knew and said, well, what should I do about this? And then there's a sort of apprenticeship, right, that comes with that. And they say, well, in the past, this happened to me and I tried this, or I did this and that was a mistake, so don't do that. And you sort of learn from priests that went before you.
It's a mentorship thing. Is really the best training.
Yeah,
It's mentor.
Yeah, I mean, I had to do that semi-remote. I mean, there was one that was within an hour's drive of me that was, became a very close and mentor and friend, and still is.
Yeah.
Who was, of a different generation, shall we say? But other than that, it was then research. I mean, when God calls you to something, you have to, it's incumbent on you to then try and educate yourself and put in the effort to be as effective as you can be. So I've read all of Father Amorth's books. I've read deep theology, the church fathers on this, orthodox praxis, how exorcism develops within the Western Church, and therefore what's gone wrong in the last 50 years. I mean, it's not something that you have to find; it finds you.
Well said. Now, Mason said, I remember in The Exorcist that the rite of exorcism needs permission to perform the rite. I think that's what the Roman Catholic Church. That is correct. Yeah. The presiding bishop of the diocesan bishop is the one that makes the decision. So in my case, I am the only bishop that needed to make the decision. So as a bishop, I can authorize my own cases and
in my case, my bishop.
Your bishop does it for you.
Exorcist.
Yeah, there you go. So that's the same. Yeah, so that's how it works. So yeah, it's similar, but different. Christopher Waltz, Father Rippinger, says during Mass that talking during Mass is a sin. I have children and often have to whisper to them to quiet them, but my diocese all listen to Father Rippinger. Any opinions on this, Bishop? Okay, look.
He's not talking about that.
I respect the priesthood, okay? In the same way that I respect the presidency of the United States. That doesn't necessarily mean that I think these people are infallible or that they are always good at their job, okay? Father Rippinger says a lot of alarmist things, some things that are borderline dispensationalists, not even Catholic theology.
I can't believe he's not been reined in, actually.
I don't understand it.
He's gotten very popular on social media.
Yeah, in like the
2019. We are much more responsible than he is in how we talk about these things.
Far more. So I would take Father Rippinger's views on things with a grain of salt. Okay. He's
also a man that's never had a child, by the way.
I think it would be a beautiful thing to have your children. I mean, children can't sit still and they're going to talk. They might ask questions. They might act up. But my God, they're in the presence of God. Is God going to come down and say, "Shut your kid up. We're having mass"? Bring me the little children. Bring me the little children.
It is not a sin. Look, if you're trying to handle something that needs to be handled, that is not a sin. All right. If you're going to be like going to mass and sitting on your phone, watching your TikTok because it's boring,
disrupting things.
That's a little more. Is a sin. I would think that's a little more.
But to just this. Okay. We were talking about dogmatism. This is what I define in my American vernacular as dogmatism. When somebody says something, that's dogmatic thinking, and that pushes people away, and it makes people uncomfortable, and you can lose souls this way. That is an irresponsible thing for that priest to say. So look, if you like him, I'm not going to say don't read his books, don't watch the videos about him.
By the way, I think he's a problematic figure. I stand by what I've said.
He's very dispensationalist, Father. I mean, he believes that there's an antichrist that's coming. He's going to mislead souls. He's going to. I mean, he doesn't believe in the third Jewish temple. He doesn't believe in that stuff. No. But he does. I mean, he really has some wild Protestant-like ideas about the end times, and he thinks that aliens are demons, UFOs are deceptions of demons. It's really bizarre. Now, I know that that's a common thing in Protestantism, but I've never heard a Catholic talk that way. Honestly, Catholics are usually more rational than that.
Michael Knowles does. Knowles thinks that UFOs are demons.
The church has changed so much. When I was a seminarian...
I'm going to say this is not the Catholic Church. This is America.
Yeah, well, America's got its own way of doing things.
This is American culture. You're a subculture. No one's talking about this in Australian parishes.
No. I hope not. God, there needs to be a respite somewhere in the world.
That's why I love doing this show. It's like, okay, so this is
you learn a lot about us, don't you? You'll understand me a lot more and why I'm the way I am. All right, April, what's our next question?
Another question that comes from Mason is, when the Nephilim procreated with the daughters of men and produced giants before the flood and were destroyed in the flood, why were there still giants after the flood?
Caves.
All right, the giants.
So here's where we're getting into the...
Okay, I don't subscribe to the idea that these are like hybrid angels. First of all, angels we know from the New Testament cannot reproduce. All right, they don't have gender. All right, so there is no copulating with.
Yeah, we give them gender.
The daughters of men and the sons of God that this comes from is largely believed to be two different groups of humans. One that was a very tall group, probably the same group that Goliath comes from, and then a smaller group, because most people in the ancient world were a lot shorter than we are today. We'd probably look like giants to them. And, genetics, where do we get these tall genes that we have? It's not uncommon to see people over 6 feet. Where does that come from? Well, it comes from these other groups that were tall. Okay, and then they had intermingled, but it's largely believed, okay, that the sons the sons of God, were sort of like the children of Abel, and then the sons of the daughters of man were like the children of Cain. and this sort of gets mixed into this mythology that these were like supernatural beings and everything else, and angels that came down. Like, angels cannot have sex with people. It does not happen. Get that out. Get that out of your head. I'm not saying that this quadrant is suggesting that, but it is a common belief system that I think needs to go. The ancient aliens thing on history has not helped that.
No.
And again, memes, TikTok culture, all this stuff creates these ridiculous theological presumptions. And then you get people like
Remember
Rippinger that gets out there and starts talking authoritatively, and he talks very authoritatively. When he sits down, he talks like he's the Pope himself.
He's engaging,
giving a divine commandment. And people believe that, and because he's the real Catholic Church, right? So no one's questioning it. But I think Father Chris is right. Why hasn't anyone reeled him in? I sometimes wonder, am I the reason? Because he came around, he got popular around 2019 after I had already created a sort of an internet presence for doing this work as a Catholic bishop. And I wonder sometimes if they didn't let him do this so that they could get people back on track. I'm being kind of facetious here, but maybe that's the reason why they haven't reeled him in, because it's they need somebody out there that's saying wild things.
Also, I think he's not diocesan, is he? I think he's a member of the community.
He's the head of a religious community that I believe he started, but it is a legitimate Roman Catholic, authorized under the Archbishop of Denver.
Yeah.
Denver, I think. I could be wrong. But I don't follow him too closely. But yeah, he's he's a little crazy. I would say be careful with some of the things he says, because he's a little crazy in his. I mean, I'm not saying he's like crazy. I'm saying he's crazy in his speech. He says some crazy things. Okay, what's our next one?
Another question comes from Diana. It says, Christians tell me Catholics aren't Christian and are idol worshippers. Yeah. They also claim the Pope is woke. How would you address these comments?
Gosh, that's a show. The Pope is woke. I mean, he is. He's very liberal, extremely liberal. And most of the popes have been liberal since John Paul II. Benedict XVI. Everybody, Francis and Leo are liberals. They are, and there's no question about it. They don't hide it.
But it doesn't matter.
It shouldn't matter, although when they get political, it matters, and that's what creates problems. But to the other question is, no, Catholics are not idol worshippers. Well, they can be if they worship the papacy over God, and some of them seem to. But you Protestants can be, idol worshippers too with your Bible. So the fact is, anything you put above God, even if it's a holy thing, is still an idol and is still idolatry and is still a sin, a mortal sin at that. Now, when you're talking about the Catholic Church, not being Christian, I mean, where do you think Christianity came from? I mean, the Catholic Church is part of one of the first 5 historical Christian churches: Rome, Antioch, Jerusalem, Alexandria, Constantinople. All right, so these are the 5 original churches of Christianity. Rome is what became the Roman Catholic Church. It is Christianity. I mean, we would not be able to call yourself Christian today if the Catholic Church hadn't existed, because that's where it comes from. So when people say Catholics aren't Christian, it's kind of like saying that that babies aren't human, or
there are people that believe that.
I mean, yes. Well, okay. Let me say that teenagers aren't human. Well, I guess there's people that believe that too. But the fact is, it's like it's crazy talk, because you're talking about a tradition of Christianity. Where are you getting the basis when somebody says that? It's like, where are you getting the basis that they're not Christian? Because that is Christianity. You only have it today because of Rome. And I will say that, I'll give Rome the credit. I mean, look, Orthodoxy did a lot, but Orthodoxy is really bad at evangelizing. Rome did a much better job in terms of connecting the world. Orthodoxy does not do a good job at that at all. They're very ethnic, and Rome is not. Rome.
I will just put my little hand up for the British Empire that did a fair bit as well.
Well, yeah, I mean, yeah, but you only were able to because Rome existed, though.
I know, that's right. I'm just saying though, it did have something to do with sort of having a great big navy and going to countries and taking the gospel with them.
Yeah,
So I'll just put my little hand up for that.
Oh my gosh, there's so many good questions. You guys have so many for us, and I of course I had to go and say,
great.
I had to go and
Good
say,
problems.
it really good. It is a good problem. I mean, I had to go and say, I'm not able to. I mean, we usually get to all the questions. Well, tonight we're not going to, but you have some good ones. I will end on this one. Mason says, "Is it safe to ignore the Roman Pope's teachings that contradict and interfere with God's decrees from worshiping God?" Well, I mean, that's true for anybody. If he is indeed saying
Show
something,
me one.
you'd have to show me what you're talking about. But if he is indeed saying something that does that, then yeah, of course
I
you
don't
do.
think he does.
But you have to. I mean, you got to make sure, are you really qualified to assess whether or not he said something like that? So do your research. If something seems wrong, talk
Also,
to a priest
find
about
out
it.
exactly what he said.
Yeah.
Find out exactly what he said.
Yeah.
Don't read what the bloody newspaper said
Yeah,
he said.
because they're gonna pick it apart and put a lean on it, and some of it's just not even
there was a
remotely
recent
true.
one with Pope Leo. Oh, he's given this sermon and it's all about Trump. And he did a rare thing. I think he should stop doing this actually, because it feeds it. But Pope Leo came out and said, "I wrote this homily 2 weeks ago."
Yeah.
It's got nothing to do with what you say it has.
Yeah.
Now he said that, I think he should never do that again. Because it's actually unbecoming. For the Holy Father to have to justify himself in that way. But look, people are going to spin. But yeah, if you can show me where a pope has done anything that breaches, taught something that says go against the Ten Commandments, I want to see it. I don't believe you.
Yeah, I mean, you have to understand the context too of everything, because you can't trust that damn thing the media says. I can tell you that right now. I can tell you that right now.
Don't read it on Wikipedia and think you understand it.
Oh my God, is that not the truth?
Oh my God,
is that not the truth?
Talk about the devil.
Because I mean, people think just because they have a platform now that the world can read, that makes them an authority in everything. The fact of the matter is, it makes you actually more foolish, because you're not listening. And wisdom comes from listening, not so much from talking. Take it from someone who likes to talk a lot. Believe me, I have to do a lot of listening too. Okay, so next week we are going to be talking about paranormal awareness and raising vibrations with guest Michelle Ferguson. That's going to be a week from today, Tuesday at 8 p.m. Eastern Time. We hope that you'll join us for that. It's been a fantastic show. I want to thank each and every one of you for being with us tonight and spending your Tuesday with us. Great questions from the audience. You guys are fantastic. Thank you so much to our callers, also Brandon and our caller. I don't know if we got her name, but thank you for calling into the show.
Yes.
It makes the show so much more interesting. Father Chris, thank you. April, thank you. And Jamie, thank you.
Yes, thanks everybody.
Thanks to our moderators. You guys really keep it all together, and having to do all the work of checking all the different platforms to get the questions to us. We can't thank you enough. So we'll be here next week, but until then, I'll see you out there in the ether. God bless everybody.
Take care, guys.